questions from the online participants, please make a comment in the chat provided, and we'll catch up with you. And then also a final note for those who wish to claim CPT points or continuous professional development points. We have a facility for that, so please make sure that you register your for EXA registration numbers. Is that correct, Kevin? So just let us know. Send us an email to the secretary, and we'll catch up with you so we can log those for you. So it falls to me to introduce our chairman of the Southern African branch of the Nautical Institute, John Abercrombie, to welcome.
Thank you, David, for that introduction. It gives me great pleasure on behalf of the Southern African branch to welcome you, the participants and guests who are with us online, to this conference celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Nautical Institute. This is one of many international events which have been presented by Nautical Institute branches all over the world in support of the theme, Maritime Leadership in a Changing World. We are particularly honored today to welcome the Nautical Institute President, Captain André Legerman, and his wife, Deborah, joining us here in Cape Town. And then this Chief Executive Officer, Captain John Lloyd, and other senior managers and members from the Nautical Institute headquarters in London joining us online. We extend a welcome to all Nautical Institute members and to their guests from other organizations, with particular reference to the president of SAIMINA, Kevin Watson, the chairman of the General Boerder Old Boys Association, Tony Nicholas, and the members of Society of Master Mariners of South Africa, and all the members of organizations which have, by their presence at this conference, demonstrated their support of the Nautical Institute anniversary celebration. We welcome all representatives of our global and local sponsors whose names appear right here and in the program. It is the generosity of our sponsors and their support of the Nautical Institute and the Southern Africa branch that has made it possible for us to host you here and online. The theme of this conference, in line with the Maritime Leadership in a Changing World, is ESG, the next generation of leadership. The Southern Africa branch of the Nautical Institute extend a welcome and thanks to the presenters of papers to the conference, Dr. Sayed Wahid Wakili from the World Maritime University, Helio Vicente from the International Chamber of Shipping, and Professor Olshe from the World Maritime University. We also welcome all panelists and the panel moderators, namely Captain Nick Sloan, Captain John Lloyd, and Mrs. Nancy Karigitu, who is in Kenya. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Captain Andre Le Gobain, who was elected president of the Nautical Institute in July 2022, after having joined the Institute in 1984. Andre started his seagoing career with Cunard Shipping Services Limited, where he served as a deck officer in various ranks on a wide variety of vessels. He served as master of high-speed ferries, including hydrofoils and mono and multi-hull ro-ro passenger vessels. In about 1999, Andre joined the London pilotage service until he immigrated to the United States of America in 2004. Andre was then a fellow of the Nautical Institute, and he achieved a degree from Middlesex University, London, in 2009, following which his book, Mentoring at Sea, The 10-Minute Challenge, was published by the Nautical Institute. In 2013, Andre was awarded the prestigious British Merchant Navy Medal for services to the maritime industry and the Nautical Institute. After 8 years of working as a marine consultant in Houston, Andre decided to return to sea, and he is currently employed as a mooring master in the lightering trade, undertaking underway ship-to-ship transfers of oil offshore in the United States and South America. Andre also offers his services as expert witness and consultant based on his vast experience in the maritime industry. And ladies and gentlemen, it now gives me pleasure to call upon Captain Andre to address us.
Can we have this screen on as well? Thanks. There we go, it works. Okay, I'm delighted to be here today, and thank you for inviting me and for making Debbie, my wife, and I so very welcome as we take part in this conference and celebrate the Nautical Institute's 50th anniversary. And a special welcome to those of you joining us online. Absolutely delighted that you can be here today as well. It's so nice to see everyone in the room. But one of the best things that's come out of COVID is that nowadays, no matter where you live globally, we're only separated by time zones. So we can welcome people online to join in our conference, engage with us today. Really important for us. But our last 50th anniversary celebration, what a year it's been. What a tremendous achievement. And I commend all of you here in South Africa on the significant contributions you've made to our Institute's success to date. What a year it's been. And where better to draw our celebrations to a close than in the iconic city of Cape Town. I was last here in 1981 as a second trip deck cadet on board this vessel, the Port Chalmers, where we called in here to load apples for Antwerp and Sheerness. How that morning stands out in my memory when we arrived here, just as the sun was rising over Table Mountain. One of those lasting memories as a seafarer that's almost as vivid today as it was 42 years ago. Oh gosh, look at the smiles back there. You weren't even born, were you? I can see the reaction from here, especially from the cadets. Here's another gray-haired old man going to lecture us on how it was in the good old days. Well, I'm delighted to say you're completely wrong. I'm going to talk to you as a seafarer who has one of the most exciting seagoing jobs in the current merchant industry. You see, this is what I do for a living. Nothing. Do I try again? No. I think I'm. There we are. Okay. Right. All right. Okay. Yeah. We have cadets here that can help me with the technology. Okay. So I'm on the blue deck hull tanker there. It's a tanker in ballast. That one looks like a Suezmax, so 274 meters long, 48 meters wide, and only drawing about 9.5 meters in ballast. The vessel on the left is a fully laden VLCC, 333 meters in length, 60 meters wide, and certainly when they come into the Gulf of Mexico, where we offload them, they're drawing 20 meters of draft. And there we are. I've just come out on the bridge wing of my vessel. We're approaching the other vessel, and we're working our way up to about 5 knots. No external help, just the two of us. And as you can see in this photo here, a little bit of help in that we've got fenders along the starboard side of the tanker I'm approaching. Keep maneuvering towards them, just using the helm and the engine on my tanker. And there I am, parallel with the vessel, just about to come alongside and safely alongside, moored up. There we are, 3.5 meters apart, or 11 feet in the American language. Stop there. So that's what I do for a living. So look, as we try and identify future leadership challenges, I often contemplate what skills we should be passing on to our younger seafarers so that they're fully prepared to take over from us. Let's be honest, we have very little idea what the future vessel is going to look like. But then hasn't every generation of seafarers been the same? You have to let me know if you recognize any of these. The Endeavour, Captain Cook's vessel. Cutty Sark. The Warrior, laid up in Portsmouth there. One of the iconic vessels there, the Queen Mary, the transatlantic trade. Coming up far more up to date, this at the time, the Cougar Ace, one of the biggest container vessels in the world. And then the one that sailed last year eventually, the Mayflower 400, totally autonomous ship. They eventually managed to get it across the Atlantic. Oh, sorry, no, not that one. Look, let me take you back to my very first vessel. There we are. A small cargo and passenger ship running between two of the smaller British Channel Islands where I was born and grew up. This vessel under the command of a strict and principled Irishman who as a boy ran away to sea sometime before the Second World War. He taught me basic seamanship, ship handling, meteorology, and many other skills that I still use today. I'm far more qualified academically than he ever was. But he, along with many other mentors, gave me the strong foundation of knowledge that I continue to build on today. Fast forward to just about 14 days ago, when I was on board and maneuvering this vessel. One of the world's largest DP2 Suezmax shuttle tankers, 282 meters in length and capable of maneuvering and maintaining position without any external help to within 1 meter. There was no way that my first captain of that small cargo ship could ever have envisaged a vessel like this. Yet he gave me the strong foundation of knowledge that I was able to build on so that I could. I've taken basic navigation skills that I learned from a young age and mixed them with the most modern technology available today. So evidenced by this, I suggest that we need to pass on the skills that we have now to our next generation of seafarers. just as I have done. They'll adapt it, they'll mix it with the latest technology on their vessels and successfully navigate into their future. So how do we pass that knowledge on? Well, there's no better way than by an informal system of knowledge transfer that I call mentoring. We've talked a lot about mentoring over the last 12 years since the Nautical Institute mentoring project began in earnest. I believe the 10-minute challenge is just as relevant today. That lovely tradition of taking someone aside and taking a few minutes out of your busy schedule to teach them something, to show them how to do something, or to let them try something for themselves under your watchful guidance. The challenge goes on, and so will the conversation. At the Nautical Institute, we recognize that high-quality leadership and excellent change management is essential in a time of accelerated development. Our leaders of tomorrow are here with us today. They're on our ships, they're in our offices, they're in our schools, they're in our homes, and I'm absolutely delighted to say they're in our conference today. We must give them the opportunity to learn, to lead by gaining a sufficient foundation of experiential knowledge. And it's absolutely vital that we recognize that the needs, priorities, and the expectation of the next generation are different. What was considered acceptable in the 1980s when many of us went to sea and started our careers is totally unacceptable today. It's us. It's the senior management and industry members that must change to accommodate those needs. If we can't, then I respectfully suggest perhaps it's time that we move on. We must support and give every opportunity to these younger career professionals, especially cadets who are trying to get relevant sea time to enable them to become competent watchkeeping officers. I believe that this is one of the greatest challenges we face in the maritime industry. Globally, we have so many cadets who are trying to find a berth on a vessel but are unable to do so. Or even worse, they're paying agents substantial amounts of money to get them on a ship. I've heard recently of youngsters or their families having to pay $5,000 in India just to get themselves put on a ship. You know, it's totally unacceptable. It's something we have to do. Many cadets from all over the world contact me and other members of the Nautical Institute to help them find a berth on a ship, having successfully completed their time at university. During my presidency, I want to change the situation. I want to work with you to develop ideas that ensure every cadet. And let me give you a quick example of how that can work. When I was in Karachi in Pakistan last year, a ship's agency and manager agency stepped up. They're called Global Radiance. They've got offices in Karachi and in Singapore. And after they heard me speak, they agreed to put cadets on their ships that they manage at cost to the ship owner. So they're not taking an agency fee. And that includes all of the cadet ship and any service needs that those cadets need. You know, what a huge difference that makes to those young seafarers and to their companies. It's a win-win, and it was really encouraging. And we've had a couple of shipping companies step up to us and say that they're going to do more. They take cadets from their own countries, their own national cadets, but they've also offered to take a couple of cadets more and to give them some sea time. No offer of long-term prospects. They have their own cadets for that, but they're giving them that experience. We're hearing some exciting news from Maersk here in Cape Town and in South Africa at the moment. And that came out, I think it was yesterday, in the maritime presses, where they're going to be taking some more cadets from here. So I'm really excited to hear that. But as companies, we can, and I hope will, do more. We must look forward. We must look toward the challenges of a greener future. I'm reminded of the UK MCA's work anniversary Seaways supplement. Climate change is one of the most serious environmental challenges we face. If anyone is still in any doubt about climate change, I respectfully suggest to understand. The Alfara, the Bahamas. There's absolutely no doubt about climate change in the seafarer's mind. It's good to see that a significant number of the world's leading shipping companies, including some here in South Africa, have engaged with the need to change and are heading in the right direction, greener ships. These ships are highly sophisticated, at the cutting edge of technology, and require the best onboard operators to sail them and manage them ashore. Highly trained professionals going to come from? Well, if you want the very best, I suggest you train them yourself. What better way is there to guarantee the highest quality of stuff by you training them? So those people with these ships, I say to you, you've committed millions of dollars to build these ships. Thank you. Yep. You've committed millions of dollars to build these ships. And you've committed to help the environment by reducing your carbon footprint. I'm asking you to commit a further small amount in comparison to the future seafarer by putting at least 2 cadets on board every one of these new ships. These cadets are the future leaders who will be in charge of these vessels within the lifetime of the ship. Think about it. Within the lifetime of the ship, they're going to be your captains, your chief engineers, or ashore, they're going to be your superintendents, your managers, or even your CEOs. And just at this moment, we're talking about leaders of tomorrow. I'd like to say a particularly warm welcome to our cadets and to our younger careers professionals who've joined us both in the room and online. It's your future that we're discussing. So I ask you, please speak up and tell us what you need. We're not psychic. You have to tell us what you need as much as we have to listen. We're a team, and neither can function without the other. I regularly remind my crews as we're berthing a tanker that I cannot do this alone. I need them as much as they need me. None of what I've spoken about this afternoon can be achieved by one person. But at the Nautical Institute, we're over 8,500 members, and we're growing rapidly towards our goal within this strategic plan of 10,000 members. Together, we can achieve great things as we have done over the last 50 years. As a wise friend once told me, Andre, no matter where you are in life or your career, this is our time to make a difference. I challenge you to join me in using our time constructively to make that important difference for the next generation of seafarers and maritime career professionals. And finally, on behalf of everyone at the Nautical Institute, I want to say a big thank you to our generous sponsors who've made this and every other 50th anniversary event possible. Your support and generosity over the last 12 months is so much appreciated. Thank you. And with that, I hand you back to David. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're just going to do a little bit of a switch around. So we can move off to let the panelists come up. Captain Nick and Kevin, would you like to join me up onto the podium? Thank you. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to introduce the first speaker shortly to take care of or to talk about the environmental aspects that we want to cover. Just another quick point, if there are any questions, if you could just keep them over to the end of the panel or during the panel discussion. And then also, if you have a question, just raise your hand during that time and just wait until we get the mic to you so that those online attendees can also hear you what your question is. Thanks very much. So just to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Syed Vakili from the World Maritime University. He has more than 20 years experience in the maritime industry and academia. Before joining the World Maritime University, he served in different ocean-going and offshore vessels and engaged in various oil and gas development projects. He joined the WMU in 2017 and graduated with distinction for an MSc degree in maritime in energy management, and at the World Maritime University at Malmö, Sweden, and completed his PhD on improving energy efficiency and reducing air emissions in life cycle perspectives for the maritime industry, and in particular focus on maritime land-based infrastructure, shipyards. His research interest focuses on a holistic, systematic, and interdisciplinary approach to reducing air emissions, alternative fuels, and improved energy efficiency during life cycle of ships, from design to eventual scrapping, and its interaction with land-based infrastructure such as ports and shipyards. He's also interested in cybersecurity and also reducing underwater noise pollution from commercial vessels, and is linked to energy efficiency. Having equally served at sea as officer and master and engaged in research development and teaching at university, he's demonstrated a significant appetite for effective use of theoretical knowledge in solving day-to-day technical problems. With a strong background on issues of ship safety, environmental protection, and in particular reduction of air emissions, as well as in-depth knowledge of the principles of the maritime industry in the life cycle perspective, along with project-based practical knowledge, he has a proven ability to work as a versatile member of any team in any project environment. We welcome Dr. Vakili to present the environmental topic, decarbonization, and a case study. Thank you.
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, David. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to attend at this conference in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Nautical Institute organized by Nautical Institute Southern Africa branch. I'm Wahid Vakili, Research Associate at World Maritime University. Today's presentation, if I'm going to share the screen. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, we've got you.
Okay, thank you. Today, I'm going to talk about the sustainable energy for domestic freight transport. It is a case study which has been conducted in Philippines, and we will investigate a battery power and hybrid vessel in the Philippines. IMO, as a regulatory body of the international shipping, has an ambitious goal for reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and air emissions. Although shipping has a great role in well-being of the human being, but however, it has a negative impact, and IMO as a regulatory body has ambitious goal to reduce negative impact, and one of the most important is air emissions and greenhouse gas emissions. The initial IMO greenhouse gas emission has aimed to reduce total greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2050 and carbon intensity 40% by 2030 and 70% by 2050 in comparison by 2008. And also ambitious goal is to decarbonize by end of the centuries. In order to achieve the goal, IMO consider multidimensional approach, technical, operational. In the technical, we have the EEDI and EXI. In the operational, we have SIMP and enhanced SIMPs. And also we have a different indicator, energy efficiency operation indicator and carbon intensity indicator, which there are some challenges also with this indicator. I'm not going to detail in this regard. And by end of 2023, IMO is going to revise the initial greenhouse gas strategy, and probably the economic pillar will be taken into consideration by market-based measures. Although international shipping has 2.89 contribute to 2.89 percent of total greenhouse gas emissions, global greenhouse gas emissions. In the fourth greenhouse gas study, has been noticed that the role of domestic vessels in contribution of total greenhouse gas emission of the shipping has been underestimated, and the study shows that the contribution of domestic shipping is around 30% of total greenhouse gas emission of global shipping. Although the domestic shipping is under category of the governments, but we see this motivation and trends from the states and the countries that they consider the decarbonization of the domestic fleets in their national determined contribution under Paris Agreement. And IMO also understood and take into consideration that if we want to have a zero emission shipping industry, we have to have a holistic approach and consider also domestic shipping. In this order, IMO tries to help the countries who have this ambitious goal for decarbonization of the domestic fleet with a special focus on developing states, seas, and less developed countries. Taking this into consideration, World Maritime University in collaboration with IMO and World Bank and also other in the policymakers like Marina and Philippine Coast Guards and Philippine Port Authority in addition of Starlight University conducted project. The aim of project was a study to address safety and energy efficiency of a domestic passenger ship, which I'm going to talk about energy efficiency and environmental aspect of this project. The overall aim of the project was to analyze the current state of domestic ferry industry with regards to energy efficiency and carbon footprint with the following objectives. The main objective was identify practical and cost-effective options to reduce carbon footprint in the short term, develop a feasible roadmap for the short, medium, and long term to reduce carbon footprint, and provide support for the development and implementation of national action plan focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and improve energy efficiency. The first step which we take into consideration was database. So for mapping, we need a database. However, the big challenge that we encountered during the project that there was lack of the database. In this regard, we had a close collaboration with different stakeholders, active stakeholders in the Philippine authorities in order to create a database. Finally, we could create a database and we map the shipping, domestic shipping in the Philippines. As you see on the slide, we categorize shipping to less than 100 GT and above 100 GP. The reason that for this one is that in the Philippines, there are a small boat which called motor bancos, and there is somehow heritage of Philippines they use for the shipping, and also they use for transferring of the people between the islands. Around 7,000 vessels was under 100 GT, and there were only 295 vessels were above 100 GT. The total fuel consumption which they used was around 260,000 tons. As you see on the other slides in the right side, you see that the contribution of the small vessels, although they were 7,000, the contribution to greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 emissions was 40%, and 86% of the greenhouse gas emissions from domestic ferry vessel belonged to the vessel above 100 GT. In the previous study which Philippines conducted, and also many papers highlighted that for the short sea shipping and also for small vessels, using the battery vessels or hybrid vessels is a good solution for decarbonization of the shipping. So we criticize this statement and we investigate in the Philippines for the case of the Philippines, and we raise this question: are battery power vessels the best solution for domestic ferry segment or not? In the first step, we calculated the carbon dioxide equivalent of different fuel types of electricity generation, because for the battery vessel and hybrid vessel, the most important factor must be taken into consideration is that what is the energy and source of the energy that produces electricity, and the battery receives that electricity. As you see that the coal produce 820 820 gram of CO2 equivalent. And as you see, the biomass and natural gas, it will be reduced. And for the windshore, it is around 11 gram of CO2. The difference between windshore and the coal is around 82 times. It means that if you produce 1 kilowatt hours, 1 kilowatt in electricity from coal, it is 82 times more pollutant than if you produce electricity from windshore. On the other section, we consider that what are the source of electricity generation in the Philippines, and we categorize and distribution of the electricity generation source in the Philippines identify. As you see, that coal contribute to 47% as a main source of electricity production, and oil is 80%. In general, 76% of the source of electricity production in the Philippines is from fossil fuel. And after that, we have LNG, which is around 11% and around 50% from renewable energy. Better understanding the situation in the Philippines in the domestic ferry vessels, we conducted a case study and we conducted the life cycle analysis, well to wake, well to tank, and tank to wake for one real ship which has an operation in the Philippines. For the well to tank, we consider oil extraction and production processing, transferring of the oil tanker transport through the sea, refinery and tank transport, and the operational field is tank to wake. And in general, if you consider life cycle of this, it is well wake. This slide shows the result of the study, and we consider six different scenarios for the case studies. One is engine power ships. As you see, the blue one is related to the rail bank, and it means that from the extraction, transportation, all till to tank of the vessel. And the orange one is related to tank to wake, which is operational. As you see, and these red circles are well to wake in the life cycle aspects. As you see, for the diesel engine power ships, it is the well to wake is around 38 kilograms CO2 per nautical mile. In the other 5 scenarios, we consider that the ship is retrofitted battery power vessels, so it means that the tank to wake, the operational, there is no emission, but we calculated well to tank. We consider that if the electricity produced from the coal, LNG, onshore wind, and hydropower and heavy oil, what are the results? As you see, if the ships retrofit to battery power vessels and receive the electricity which produced from coal or heavy oil, the diesel engine power ship is cleaner than the battery power vessel. However, if we produce the electricity from the LNG, it's a little bit cleaner than diesel engine power, but it is significantly clearer than if we produce the electricity from onshore or hydropower in comparison with diesel engine power ship. If you compare the electricity produced from coal and the battery power, you see that it's around 106 times the electricity production, and also well to tank is more pollutant when we have the electricity from the coal type of the vessel. If we receive the electricity from hydropower, the ship well to tank, the amount of the emissions, kilograms CO2 per nautical mile for this special vessel is 3 times cleaner than LNG and 6 times cleaner than coal. We can conclude that the source of the electricity which produce the energy is play a crucial role for hybrid vessels and battery power vessels, and in this case is not always good for the Philippines. This good for the these options and retrofitting and transition is good for the countries with the source of electricity is from cleaner source of energy than ships, like renewable energy. In this regards, taking this into consideration and considering a holistic approach, we consider the port's role in decarbonization, because in the IMO has highlighted the role of all stakeholders, especially port, for the decarbonization. And in order to solve this problem, which we highlighted that the source of energy in the Philippines is from more fossil fuel, so the battery power is not a good option. And also we have taken into consideration other barriers which exist. The capacity of the national grid in the Philippines was not sufficient, and also there was a lack of infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure to support battery and hybrid vessels. So we propose to install and consider a smart grid in the Philippines. In this case, we provided a smart grid, which is a central management and control, which electricity produced from the renewable source of energy like wind, solar, hydropower. And also we consider energy storage system in order to provide the clean required electricity to hybrid and battery powered vessels, and also support the port cities designed for future port cities. In this regard, we conducted case studies. We considered 6 different scenarios for the important port in the Philippines. Again, there was lack of information exists, so we created a baseline regarding the operational cost, total cost, LCOE, and the environmental aspects, and we defined 6 different scenarios: grid connected and not grid connected, standalone mode. So the result shows that a smart grid can accelerate decarbonization of the domestic fleet in the Philippines. We had 6 different scenarios, and we conducted around 1,400 different simulations. The result shows that grid-connected system has better LCOE than standalone mode. And by replacing the diesel generator to gas generators, we could see and observe that the standalone mode, both in the economic aspects and environmental aspects, has been improved. And providing the sustainable infrastructure like a smart grid can improve the sustainability of the port cities and future port cities design. With the result, we provide the primary roadmap for decarbonization of domestic freight in the Philippines. We consider the holistic, systematic, and transdisciplinary approach in order to accelerate decarbonization. We have to break the silos between different stakeholders, and we have to have the same approach and same goals. So we also consider different active stakeholders, shipping companies, ports, shipyards, and also we consider managerial levels and economic aspects in the short, medium, and long term. Also, we consider the applied green economy in the landscape. Role of the government and regulatory bodies play a crucial role in decarbonization of the domestic fleet. Also, we have to consider and take into consideration a green supply chains. We have to consider supply chains are not only focused in one domain, like energy power system, which we highlighted that energy source of the electricity in the Philippines was not clean, so it could not help to use the battery and hybrid vessels. And also we have to take into consideration the impact assessment. It is very important to consider that each of these measures and tools, how will impact to the society and to the Philippines. So for the ship, we had a small ferries and motor tankers, hybridization and electrification, and also new design of the ships has been proposed. By improve the new design of the ships, we can improve energy efficiency of the ships and economic skills. As I mentioned, there are many small boats. However, by considering economic skills means that designing and building the larger vessels, we can improve energy scale of the ships. And also for the large ferries, we consider speed optimization. It's not always possible to take into consideration speed optimization because the routes are very short, the sailing are very short. However, some ferry companies had a longer voyage, so speed optimization could be taken into consideration. Appropriated maintenance program should be taken into consideration, and propulsion device or energy saving device was another factors. Wind propulsion, Philippine rotors was good. We could identify the Philippine rotors, and the wind propulsion play a crucial role also for domestic ferries in the Philippines for the larger ferries. And of course, alternative fuel play a crucial role based on the 4 greenhouse gas emissions. 48% of the decarbonization depends on the availability of the alternative and green fuels. In the short term, we propose the LNG because Philippines invests a lot in the LNG, but it can act as a transitional fuel, and in parallel with that, investment in the alternative fuel like biofuel and biomethanol should be taken into consideration, and hybridization and electrification also for the large ferries. In the medium terms, the more focus is to investment on renewable energy and produce green biofuel and methanol, and in the long term, green ammonia and green hydrogen. There is a great potential because Philippines has a potential to produce lots of renewable energy, and in the market, in the future market, which is around $1 trillion US for the alternative fuel, Philippines can play a crucial role in this regard if they invest properly in the renewable energy. In the shipping companies, we consider education system and capacity building and energy management plan. We identify the barriers which exist that the seafarers in the domestic fleet needs more education and needs to invest in the capacity building, not only for the shipping companies, but also for the ports. We look at the ports and the shipyards also as an energy hub, using renewable energy and alternative fuels in the ports and the shipyards. Digitalization and automation play a crucial role. Cold ironing infrastructure and sustainable infrastructure should be taken into consideration. Using energy efficient equipment, energy management plan, and considering green supply chains should be considered for ports and shipyards in the short term, and in the medium term, as I highlighted, we consider both of them as an energy hub and also consider the smart grid as a required sustainable infrastructure. In the managerial level, landscape play crucial roles, the government, providing the education system, supporting the capacity building, creating the database, and the data play crucial role for take appropriate action and decision regarding the decarbonization. Set greenhouse gas emission reduction target. However, these targets should be ambitious, should be rational, and also establish a green corridor. We propose a green corridor in the Philippines in order to invest appropriate infrastructures and policy measures in order to identify the barriers and provide the motivations for other domain of the domestic shipping in the Philippines. And the economic aspects, global funding and green national fund, and considering market-based measure and incentive program play a crucial role. And for the last slide, we had adaptation framework for the decarbonization of the domestic ferries. We consider macro level, which is niche, meso level, regime, and the macro level. These projects, these innovation measures, alternative fuel, energy saving devices are the niche, which push the meso level in the regime, which is the regime, the different decision makers are in the regime. For example, for the Philippines, we have the Marina, PPA, port authorities, Coast Guard, ship owners, Department of the Transportation, which will be supported by these niche and innovation measures. And at the top, we have the macro level and the landscape, which the government play a crucial role by considering green economy aspect and had a priority for environmental aspect and climate change, which support meso levels and force the meso levels decision makers in the regime side to take appropriate action for decarbonization. As much as the decision makers in the regime side has the same priorities, the same goal, and the same trend, the decarbonization of the domestic fleet, in this case for the Philippines, can be accelerated. Thank you very much for your attention, and this is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vikili.
My pleasure.
We are nicely on schedule, or just about a couple of minutes ahead of schedule, but we're going to move along now into the panel discussion. I'd like to introduce the moderator for the first panel discussion, Captain Nick Sloan of Resolve Marine. It's almost so well known that I almost feel that I don't need to introduce him, but I'm going to do so because he's given me quite a significant bio here, and it's impressive, so I feel I must do this. Nick was born in Zambia, finished high school at Kearsney College in Durban. We don't hold that against him. because he's moved and he's now living with us in just outside Cape Town. He joined the Merchant Navy in 1980, SAF Marine, and appointed master in 1990 and salvage master in 1991. Nick's been involved in casualty and salvage since 1983, so for just on 40 years. He has responded to incidents on a global basis all over the Middle East, Far East, North and South America, around the continent and islands around Africa. Major casualties attended to include the Coastal Concordia, Rena, Tasman Spirit, Jolly Rubino, Sealand Express, Churchill, Treasure, Ikantanda, Castilla de Bavio, and then this one I can't pronounce. Brilliant Virtuosa, I think it's as close as I can get it. As well as 8 oil rigs and aircraft recoveries from deep water and well over 100 other casualties and oil spill responses around the world. He was involved in 7 shore crossing pipeline projects around Africa and the Black Sea, the installation of SPMs and gravity-based control buoys, startup manager for Caspian Pipeline Consortium in Russia and the Angolan LNG project, setting up of Eco Shelf Black Sea to look after the Black Sea CPC terminal, oil pollution contingency plans. Nick was appointed to the Lloyd's panel of special casualty representatives in 2010. Currently serves as a Resolve Marine Group as senior salvage master and regional director. He's currently the president of the International Salvage Union, fellow of the Nautical Institute, and the fellow of the International Institute of Marine Surveyors. In 2015, Nick was awarded the German Ocean Award and an Italian knighthood for his role in the Costa Concordia project. Nick is married to Sandra, has 3 children, and he says he loves golf, but the feeling is not entirely reciprocated. Nick is going to be joined by Dr. Vakili, and then also other panelists is Rear Admiral Kevin Watson, who's a fellow and a national president of the South African Institute for Marine Engineers and Naval Architects, and then online by Øystein Jensen, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Ojfel, and Kieran Shett, representing the Synergy Group.
Well, thank you, David. I'm going to stand up so that we can get a bit of interaction here. Welcome again to his wife. 1981, that's a long time ago. It's far too long. Hopefully you won't leave it for another 40 odd years before you come back. Obviously, the Cape of Storms was the original name of the Cape shipping route. But once they found how fertile the lands and the supply base was, it became the Cape of Good Hope. And it's an extremely and in fact, one of the major United Nations endeavors was passed by the UN last week, and that is to actually have 30% of the high seas declared as a MPA, Marine Protected Area, by 2030, so in the next 7 years. So that is an incredible start to actually get our resources and the biodiversity of the seas to revitalize them, and hopefully that will help the fish stock and also the seas the greatest consumption of carbon out of the atmosphere. So we need the seas to be healthy. Another thing that has obviously come about in the last few years is the Poseidon Principle. And that's where this ESG comes in. It was started off by the ship funding bankers. They decided that they weren't going to fund any more shipping concerns unless they were happy that the funds were going to be used as they were intended. That's been included now by the International Union of Marine Insurers, IUMI. They've also adopted the Poseidon Principle. And lately, the international group of P&I clubs, the liability underwriters, have also incorporated the Poseidon Principle. And obviously, everyone's going to start asking the question of how do you monitor your carbon footprint and what are you doing about it? Dr. Vakili, that was quite an in-depth analysis of what the Philippines are trying to do, and especially exciting to see that they're going to actually develop a green corridor for this type of sustainability. with our current challenges in South Africa, I'm not sure whether battery-powered tugs in the port is going to be the solution just yet. But hopefully we're going to stimulate some conversations and find out what is viable. Is it methanol? Is it LNG, hydrogen, ammonia? And what are the challenges with each of these products, and how does the international shipping community adapt? I'm going to actually call on Kevin to actually give us his viewpoint. Obviously, the next naval officer, engineer, and naval architect, and president of the South African Institute of Marine Engineers. Kevin, if you'd like to give an overview of how you see it working from your perspective.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? No. Working. All right. Thanks. Okay. Thanks very much. Hope it's coming through. Thank you very much for the invitation to join you and discuss some ideas. Yeah? So these are my ideas about it. Which one do you want to use? This one is better. Now it's working.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, that's good. Thanks. Obviously, express my ideas about what's going on and where we're going to. The green and environmental issues are very critical to the world. Obviously, we don't get it right. Most of us here are not going to be impacted, but your younger generations, following generations are going to be severely impacted. There's no question about that. My idea is that we can say to each other, welcome to the second paddle steamer age. And I'll explain a bit why I say we now sort of entering the second paddle steamer age. Sail in the past was very well developed and well established years gone by, and I don't think anybody ever thought it would change when Nelson was careening around the seas and doing the fights. And then eventually the paddle steamer came in, which was in reality, a very transitionary mode of transport until the screw propeller came in and we really ended up where we are today. So I think many of the things that we're doing now are all the right things. It is important to get them done and do something, but everything we're doing now is a little bit transitionary and we haven't really found the solution to where we're going to end up as a long-term sustainable mode of transport on the maritime side, because that's why we're all here. It's a maritime mode of transport that we're talking about, moving cargo around. Okay, was alluded to earlier. Yeah, there are a number of fuels that are currently being researched, developed, used, implemented to a greater or lesser degree by many of the shipping companies. A lot of them have invested, I think, a large amount of money in going into the new fuels. And we're talking about things like the ammonia, the biofuels, hydrogen, methanol, LNG, battery power is another one coming in there. But each of these we're trying to put these new technologies into existing modes of transport as we have it. So we're taking the ships that we have, or what we now understand to be a ship, and trying to force these new technologies into it in some manner. Huge tanks on the deck to try and store the fuel. You're going to end up, if you want to carry LNG or anything there, you're going to start losing cargo. It's many issues which have to be discussed and actually be built into the ships from day one. I think even the new vessels that are being built now, and I've seen a lot of them are being contracted now, are still just a slight morphing of what our current designs are. It's nothing new. It's not actual integral into the system. And I don't think we've yet realized exactly what the impacts are going to be on that. The design impact is going to be tremendous on the things, because all of these new fuels, which are environmental sensitive and doing the right things, are not really very energy intensive. And so that the density is not high enough. The whole shape and things of our ships are going to have to change to take care of it and to be able to realize a commercially viable system. There's safety considerations, which I think, as any new systems coming in, that's all been well addressed. But once the systems start to age and people become accustomed to it and it's familiar, then we're going to start seeing some serious issues arising. Probably Nick will get nice contracts to go and salvage ships which have blown up the LNG gas tanks, or the hydrogen has escaped, or the ammonia has escaped and killed somebody on board. But all of these things are going to come down the road, not with the new stuff which is now coming in, 5 years, 10 years, nice new ship. But once it starts aging and once it becomes familiar and become accustomed to it, and then the whole standards start to slip. It's a natural progression, I think. The supply and infrastructure to support these new fuels. Currently, I'm not sure there are many ports where you can go and pull in alongside and just top up your LNG tanks or top up your methanol tank or your hydrogen. There's a huge amount of infrastructure which is existing and current for oil-based fuels. To translate that into any of these new technologies is going to be a big challenge. And at the moment, we're going in many directions at once. So there's no focus as a solution. So everything is just a little bit. There's no focus on achieving a particular product that will actually then see us down into the future. Regulation and legislation, I think it's a bit of a Titanic situation in the lifeboats. It's all going to follow on once we see what actually comes out. It is pushing the changes now, as we saw in the new IMO agreements and things. But the actual safety design considerations and the impact thereafter is going to take some years to actually materialize and mature and trying to achieve a safe operating environment for the environment as well as for the seafarers and the cargo that's been moved around. Yeah, so conclusion, there's a lot of new risks coming down the road. It's absolutely necessary you have to do it. It's a natural progression that is going to happen. But I think we're still just dabbling our feet in the water and actually haven't really got anywhere. It's the right thing. It's things that we have to do. And I think eventually we will get down to a point where something becomes really viable and commercially beneficial for the environment to actually sustain maritime transport in the future. More R&D is going to be needed. There is shipping already out there, but there's a lot of research to be done, and practical experience as well is going to come down to that, training new seafarers on new technologies. All of these things have to come by. You got oil tanker masters and people qualified in that. There's nobody really doing ammonia or LNG, or well, LNG is covered a bit as a fuel, as a cargo, but not really as an onboard fuel. And the risks are going to be there. I know it was always in the Navy, it was always a risk of dragging petrol around and FCAT on ships. Now you're going to be driving your whole ship with that and not just have a couple of tons on board. I think we have challenges down the road, but we have to do it, and so anyway we can get through. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Kevin. Obviously, a few interesting times ahead from the engineering and navigational and design perspectives. Next, I'm going to ask Øystein Jensen, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer of Odfjell. He's been in that position since 2020, so some 3 years ahead of the game as far as a shipping company goes, to have a sustainability executive at that level. Obviously, Norway have just approved the first autonomous vessel to be operated in one of the fjords last week by a robotics company. So Norway and the Scandinavians always lead the pack, especially on the environmentally sensitive and fuel requirements. So it'll be very interesting to hear and see how Odfjell are addressing these challenges. So if we can call in Øystein, and over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you can hear me.
Yep.
Excellent, excellent. So again, thank you for the introduction, and congratulations with the 50th anniversary of Nautical Institute. So greetings here from Norway, from a snow-covered Norway, quite far away. So it's very nice to speak to you all there. So my name is Øystein Jensen. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer of Odfjell, and I also have a maritime background, military background. So I've also been a master or a captain on submarines, actually. So I know a little bit about being at sea after many years at sea as well. So my role is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Odfjell. Odfjell is one of the biggest chemical tanker companies in the world. We operate a fleet of about 80 large tankers. So my perspectives would here be a deep sea perspective. We have an office in South Africa as well, and we call South Africa quite often with our vessels. As mentioned earlier, with the nature of shipping, so shipping is the most environmentally friendly way of transporting goods. We must remember that because of the size. Is there no other more environmentally friendly way of transporting large volume over large distances that put it on a ship? So in order to kind of reduce emission of transportation, we should do more transport on ships. So shipping is a part of the solution in the green transition. But if you add everything together, it depends a little bit how you calculate it. Focusing on greenhouse gas division report number study 4, it's between 2 and 3% of global emission represented by shipping. So that means that we are also a part of the problem, not only the solution. And that percentage will continue to grow because we're in the hard-to-abate sector, and other sectors will decarbonize faster. And I'll come a little bit back to why that is a challenge later as well. So all this CO2 that we emit to the air, it was very clear from the IPCC report that came out in 2021 that the strong relations with the amount of CO2 that is emitted from various different sectors has a strong correlation with the temperature increase and the climate change that's going to happen and is happening. We saw last year in 2022, multiple records was beaten, heat waves, droughts, flooding all around the world. So that is just a sign of what's going to happen. So what we do about that, we believe that that is one of the major challenges that will affect us. It will not, as mentioned, it will affect our children, of course. We decide today the weather of our kids, but we also see today that it affects businesses, it affects people, and it affects the environment. And that's why we take this from a risk perspective. So we look at this from a climate risk perspective. We look at what does this mean for us as a company? What is this climate, and also from a nature perspective, what's the climate and nature risk related to Odfjell? So we look at the direct effects, and we also look at the transitional effects. And the most important transitional effects is the new policies and new regulations, technology, the risk of stranded assets. Do we bet on the right technology at the right time? So that's driving our climate risk assessment. That's driving our strategy. And we also look at it from an opportunity perspective, because we think that if you're able to capture the opportunities that this transition provides, it will give us a competitive advantage. So what we have said in Odfjell that we want to be leading in our segment on energy efficiency and low emissions, and that will give us an advantage. We see now in the EU there will be a tax on emissions from next year, and we will pass that tax on to the charter, and that means that the total cost of transportation will increase. It will be less if you transport it with Odfjell compared to others because we have lower emissions. And that's just an example of the opportunities that we see going forward. Another opportunity is that we have set ourselves very ambitious climate targets. We want to reduce our carbon emission measured by intensity with more than 50% by 2030. We are already today at 49%. I'll come back to that later. And what we did also is that we connected those climate targets to our financing. So we really demonstrate our commitment and saying that, okay, we connected to the financing. If we are not achieving these targets, there will be a penalty under the financing. And that was really attractive to a lot of investors. So a lot of investors, they came to us in that process, and there were investors saying that, okay, if it hadn't been for that sustainability link, we wouldn't have invested. There were investors that said that they were leaving shipping, and because that's regarded as a not non-green industry, but due to that sustainability link, they come back to us. And that's just another example of how the green transition can provide opportunities and benefits for us. So what we have done since starting back in 2008, we have a really, really detailed focus on how to improve efficiency. I have to admit, it was not emission reduction that was driving us at that time. It was energy efficiency and reduced cost of fuel. But that goes hand in hand, because if you reduce the amount of fuel, you reduce also emission. So we have been focusing on that very intensively over a long period of time. And that means that from 2008, the IMO benchmark for 2008 to where we are today, we are at 49% lower on the carbon intensity. We are a record low carbon intensity, and that's due to all the operational measures, as previously stated. We use weather routing, optimal routing. We use digitalization to optimize our route, collect our data, and we do technical improvements, technical retrofits. We have done projects of retrofitting our vessels with new propellers, new gears, etc., that reduced the fuel consumption with more than 20%. We do smaller and larger energy-saving devices continuously on our vessels in order to improve efficiency. So I think that journey will continue to grow. So going forward, we need to look at this from a holistic perspective. It was mentioned a well-to-tank perspective. If we jump to let's say a methanol today, or LNG or bio, if we go to methanol, if we take methanol from natural gas, that will increase the total emissions with about 20%. If we go to biofuel, if you look at that from a well-to-wake perspective and a holistic perspective, there will be 260% higher CO2 emissions than we have in a basic fuel that we have today. So we need to look at this from a holistic perspective. It is selfish from shipping to look at what I take on a tank. If I put ammonia on a tank and burn it, it will be zero. But if it has caused 120% higher CO2 emissions in the production side, it does not help the challenge, which is the climate change. So that's why we need to look at the green fuel. And green fuel will need to have a green energy. And green energy will be a scarce resource in the time to come. In order to produce green ammonia, e-fuels, e-methanol, green methanol, you will need to have green fuel, green energy available. If you look at the total energy production in the world last year, that's about 10,000 terawatt hours. If we wanted to take the global shipping to run on green ammonia today, that will require about 5,400 terawatt hours. So we are talking about half of the total non-fossil energy production in the world would be needed to produce fuel for a vessel, for the global fleet, to tackle a problem that only represents 2%. So, and one of the challenges there is that when you take the green energy, let's say from a wind turbine or a solar panel, and transform it into hydrogen, you will lose about 20–30%. And when you take that energy from hydrogen to make methanol or ammonia, you would lose another 20–30%. And when you take that ammonia and burn it in the engine, it will reduce 50%. So we are actually wasting 80% of that energy. So in that perspective, we don't believe it's the best for the world from a holistic perspective to use green energy as a scarce resource to produce a fuel. And that's why we think that shipping will come later. We don't think that it is the best way to focus on green fuel at the moment. That means that we need to do whatever we can in order to make our ships as energy efficient as possible. We need to look at the whole, we look at the wind energy and heat recovery and all the small details that we can with existing technology, because I think that the access to green energy will be scarce in several years to come.
Percent of your target already. That is fantastic. If you look at shipping as an energy efficient means of transportation, it was highlighted in your earlier statement. But if we look at the total output of carbon footprint from shipping, it's about the same as the UK. So the UK as a country puts out exactly the same carbon footprint as 95,000 ships at sea that carry 95% of global trade. So shipping is the most efficient. And if every company can improve themselves by 49% of that target, that is certainly a milestone that should be achieved. Our next speaker is actually from Synergy, and they've got a very interesting sub company called a Zola. So I'm going to ask Kieran Shett from Synergy, and basically they continuously scan the technology horizon and keeping a track on emerging technologies across industries to test the feasibility of these new technologies and see if they can adapt them into the maritime industry infrastructure. So without any further ado, let's share on synergy.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot for the invitation to talk here. And I would also like to congratulate Nautical Institute for completing 50 years. Like, Austin mentioned that, green fuel or zero carbon shipping is something that's going to come in the future. My perspective, or our perspective is that, that we feel that we need to do everything in our possible efforts to reduce this carbon emission in the meantime. And like Austin rightly mentioned, looking at green fuels, looking at fuels of the future, it's going to be a while to get there. And using this green energy to produce green ammonia or green hydrogen might not be the right solution. So what are we going to do till the time, a solution is found? The best thing is to look at vessels, to make them more energy efficient. There are companies like, Maersk or Orfel, where they have a dedicated team to do these kind of things, continuously scan the horizon, look at different advancement in technologies, look at propeller retrofits, look at using special paints, or also look at, using ducts. Or so there are also a slew of possibilities of using low hanging fruits. Like a simple example could be changing your lighting to LED lighting. So there are a lot of measures that can be done. However, we at Synergy, we have found that, there are owners who won't be having those kind of resources in-house. So those kind of owners need to be educated, need to be informed, need to be told that there are several possibilities where they can take action to make their vessels more energy efficient. And like he already mentioned, all those thoughts I completely concur. I started in 2011 as a fuel optimization engineer. Before that, I sailed for 10 years as a marine engineer on tanker ships. So we started as fuel optimization to save fuel, because saving fuel saved money. But today, the same thing is known as, reducing carbon emissions. And it goes a long way, because if you are saving fuel, you are saving money. So there is a commercial impact also to it. So what we feel is that when you look at a vessel or a fleet of vessels, it should not be a particular technology. It should not just be a propeller retrofit. It should not just be a hull paint. You look at at a bunch of different technologies that could be applicable for that particular vessel. And like rightly mentioned, the potential to save could be as high as 20 to 25% if you take the right actions. And while we all talk about ships of the future, that our crew, that our cadets, that our trainee engineers should be prepared to man those kind of vessels, it's very important. It's very, very important that they also learn to conserve what we have today. So when we are on a ship, when we are operating a ship, we should make sure that, every ton of fuel, or for that matter, every gram of fuel counts, because that goes into the atmosphere and it has some adverse effects in terms of climate change. So what I feel, my perspective is that there are a lot of possibilities, in the sense that you look at a vessel, there are design changes that are possible, then there are operational changes that are possible. It's very important that the crew, that is that the young cadets or engineers who are part of this institute, when they go on board these vessels, they understand they are the key to make this change. They are the force behind this change. So rather than just thinking about doing a major disruption, these are minor incremental steps that they need to take on a day-to-day basis. For example, there is so much advancement in data collection and data analytics. Looking at the data, you could also see, where is it that you need to make those changes in your operational pattern, in your behavior. Setting up the right KPIs for yourself and for the crew could go a long way in saving those extra tons of fuel. And what do you get in return? Of course, the environment is going to get saved, but at the same time, each ton of fuel saved saves money. And like we discussed, there is this carbon taxation that's going to come in. There's going to be pressure from all the sides to make shipping more and more energy efficient. So each step or each action that is taken by the shore staff and the ship staff toward energy efficiency is going to go a long way in terms of achieving decarbonization. And that is what I would like to say. And I would like to say that, thank you for this opportunity, for letting me speak in this event. Thank you.
such a sub sector as Azola that can actually help other ship owners. We've heard some interesting sides of the debates on green energy, environmental impact. One thing's for sure, that we are experiencing climate change. If we go back to the treasure that happened in June of 2000, the penguin population from Dasson Island and Robben Island is down 80%. The St. Croix Algoa Bay penguin population, since bunker operations have started, they're also down. So things are impacting, and we're impacting the oceans. So all the youngsters out there and all the students, you got to put your thinking caps on. There's a lot of challenges, and I'm just going to ask Dr. Bekele to come back in and just summarize what the World Maritime University is doing to actually educate and take that project that you have in the Philippines and actually send it out as information that can be used by different governments and different faculties. So Dr. Bekele.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And regarding the World Maritime University, I have to highlight that World Maritime University is a university which is under the International Maritime Organization. We have a different specialization. I think that Professor Aykut Olcher, which will be come in the next panel, have a better idea about the World Maritime University because he is the Director of Research of the Maritime Industry, Director of Research of the World Maritime University. Regarding decarbonization and the climate change impact, the Professor Olcher is the person who established a specialization, which is maritime energy management specialization. And in this maritime energy management specialization, we focus on zero emission shipping in the holistic systematic approach with consideration from land, offshore, and also ship itself. But I would like to get back to previous discussion which has been raised with the other panelists, and especially for one of the comments which you mentioned at the beginning of your introducing was about the marine protecting areas that you highlighted that recently has been approved that 30% of the land and the ocean in the high seas should be protected. I would like to highlight that how it will affect to the shipping industry and the shipping factors. As we know, the marine protection area, designated area in the ocean that's legally protected to conserve and protect the natural and cultural. However, by improving the maritime protection area, which will be impact shipping and maritime trade in several ways. First, navigational restrictions. In some cases, in maritime protection area, in some cases, shipping routes may need to be altered from the main course. And also this can result in longer travel and sea voyage and increase the fuel consumption, and we will have the higher shipping costs. On the other hand, in the fishing restriction will be affect the restrictive fishing activities, and this can impact the livelihoods of the fishermen who rely on the fishery resources and may result in reduced seafood availability and also the cost, and also increasing the monitoring and enforcement. Marine protection area may require increased monitoring from the enforcement to ensure compliance with regulation, and this can achieve burden costs and higher costs for shipping and maritime trade industry, as well as potential fines for non-compliance. Although it has the positive, additional cost in the short-term measures, but in the long term, it has a positive economic impact with regulations. There can also be positive long-term impacts like support sustainable fishery and eco-tourism, which can provide economic benefits for local communities. In general, it depends on how the regulation and what type of regulation will be applied to the marine protection area and how it will be enforced. In the meantime, there was a discussion about the decarbonization, and our friends, I highlighted several items. I would like to highlight this factor that the IMO regulation is the goal-based measures, especially for the short-term measures. It means that the ship owners should meet the goal of the IMO, but how they meet, it depends on themselves. as our colleagues are highlighted, our friends highlighted, it depends on two type of the vessel, size of the vessels, operation, folio of the vessels, the trade of the vessel. So it is not always talking about the alternative fuel or other factors. It depends on the type and size and operation of the vessels should be taken into consideration. IMO greenhouse gas strategy greenhouse gas strategy highlighted that around 68% of decarbonization depends on alternative fuel. However, we know that it's a big challenges. There is availability of the alternative fuel, green fuel, a scale of the productions, lack of regulations are another factors that should be taken into consideration. And the other good important factor that which we highlighted was the training of the personnel and capacity building. This is the role of the World Maritime University, which try, and in our team in Maritime Energy Management, we try to train the personnel and the future leader of the maritime industry to be adopt themselves with new regulations and with new technology. However, I have to highlight that there is, if you consider STCW 2010, which is the training of the seafarers, it is not adopted with the IMO greenhouse gas strategy. So it needs to revision and provide new training to the seafarers. And this is one of the projects that our team is going to conduct about the adaptation of the STCW with new technologies for decarbonization of maritime industry. Probably we will have this project in very near future with IMO and other stakeholders in the maritime industry. Thank you.
So our panel discussion on the environmental impact. Obviously, there's a few challenges to sort out. One thing is for sure, it's not going to be boring. There's going to be a lot of engineering challenges. There's going to be a lot of decision-making challenges right at the top of which way that shipping company is going to go. But we have to do it. And as Oystein said, it's a commercial advantage. So the shipping companies that get it right will be seen to be greener, to be seen to be sustainable. And obviously that's the target, is to make sure that we reduce the impact that we have on our oceans and help them recover. So thanks very much, and thanks to the panelists. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
We are a little bit over on our schedule, but are there any questions? Maybe we can take one or two questions from the floor if there are any for the panelists. There's a hand up. Can somebody get a mic?
Yeah.
Fast. Yeah, the technology is moving ahead fast now. And so the mining corporations, as I say, they've taken ownership of the actual greenhouse gas emissions from vessels. So it's an interesting concept as they go along. But remembering that these vessels now are in a captured trade, basically. So they're going to be these handy size 50,000 tonners that they're going to be operating on this trade will be captured in this trade. Otherwise, they're naturally terminals with the sail, because these masts are collapsible. So they've got to go to terminals that can accept these vessels. So that's all comes into the equation. So as the vessels go along, just personally, I foresee that they're going to be a lot of ships trading, especially up from Port Hedland on the iron ore trade from Australia up into China and especially to China. They're going to be captured trades, captured capesize running backwards and forwards, naturally with LNG, because they can do that, because those vessels are going only two ports, one port load, one port discharge, backwards and forwards. So once again, it's captured trades for vessels. So the design of the vessels now will be more on a captured basis instead of trading worldwide. Yep, that's my little input there.
Thanks, Brendan.
Yeah.
Interesting point. Thanks, Dave.
Any others? Okay, let's move on to carry on with the program then. The next section. Thanks, gentlemen. Perhaps I can just invite Captain Andre. Join me up here. I'm going to introduce the next speaker, Helio Vicente, the Senior Manager of the Trade and Policy and Employment Affairs at the International Chamber of Shipping. He's joining us online. He has over 15 years of experience in the maritime transport sector. He joined ICS in April of 2016, where he's the Secretary of Shipping and Policy on the Shipping and Policy Committee, which sets and oversees the global shipping industry agenda and official positions on shipping trade policy. He also works with the ICS Labour Affairs Committee, responsible for employment relations related matters in shipping, and on behalf of ICS, he's involved with the IMO and the International Labour Organization. He previously worked as a permanent representative of Angola to IMO and the Maritime Organization of West and Central Africa, and at the IMO subdivision for maritime security and facilitation. We look forward to Mr. Vicente's presentation titled Just Transition. I think you're still muted. No, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Here we go.
Okay, apologies for that. The wonders of technology. I was just saying thank you very much for the introduction. Just one little adjustment. I wasn't the permanent representative of Angola to the IMO. I worked for the permanent representation of Angola to the IMO. A little distinction there. If you'll permit me, I'll go ahead and share my screen and get the presentation up and running. Can you confirm that you can see it?
It's still blank.
Still blank, or I can see it on my screen. You can see it?
Yep. Yeah, all
Okay.
good.
Perfect, thank you. We got a new system, which is a little bit... Okay. Okay, I think we're there now. Okay, so I will try and be as succinct as I can. If you have any questions, happy to take them during or after the presentation, whatever is easiest for the moderators. We've had in the previous panel a discussion about the ships, although there was a little bit of a focus on the seafarer side of things. It's very much a discussion that has, up until very recently, has not happened. So as the International Chamber of Shipping, working alongside the other international organizations and Seafarer Union that you can see listed at the front, we came together at COP26 in Glasgow to essentially launch the Maritime Just Transition Task Force. Can you see the second slide, just to double check that you're still with me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes, you can. Okay, so essentially, what we're looking at is the point where climate action and the human dimension of decarbonization intersect. And from the point of view of the International Chamber of Shipping, the International Maritime Organization, the International Labour Organization, the UN Global Compact, and the International Transport Workers Federation, for us to be able to decarbonize, we need to do it through the framework and the lens of a just transition, which means greening the economy in a way that will ensure that we're sustainable with respect to the workforce, with respect to our activities, and so on. Essentially maximizing the social and economic opportunities that climate action has to offer. So, sorry, this, yeah. So as I said before, we met in Glasgow at COP26, and the task force was established, and then we spent the best part of a year working on the parameters of the project. And this culminated with the publication at COP27 of a report developed alongside Classification Society, DNV, and a 10-point action plan that complements the report produced by DNV on behalf of the Maritime Just Transition Task Force. Now, what the report highlighted are some of those key constraints which you can see on the screen now that are hampering the industry's ability to prepare seafarers for what's to come. So as you can see, the first one there is pretty self-explanatory, but the slow regulatory developments, including at the IMO, are making it much more difficult to plan and to invest in training for seafarers, including the unknowns about which alternative fuels will be taken up en masse, and so on. Another issue that we identified was the availability of competent trainers. That's a problem now, and it will be an even bigger problem when it comes to 2050, unless we start to put in place the infrastructure to address these issues today. Essentially, to help inform policymakers and other stakeholders, what the report did, the research did, was use 3 different scenarios, which you can see outlined in this slide. And essentially, what the first scenario was the IMO 2018 scenario, which is based on the IMO GHG strategy, which obviously is set to be updated. So it means that come July 2023 or towards the end of this year, this will look very differently. But the most important element to highlight here is that if we're going to look at the most ambitious scenario, which would be the one that is most aligned with the 1.5 degree temperature goal of the Paris Agreement, we could be looking at around 800,000 seafarers, as many as 800,000 seafarers requiring new skills to by the mid-2030s to be able to support the industry through the transition. Now, I think you could argue that probably you don't need a report to tell you that. If you look at the trajectory and where we as an industry are going, it's pretty obvious that we will need to train a lot of people for the transition. But we thought that it makes it much easier to fully grasp the magnitude of the task if we can see it with some numbers and figures attached to it. So looking at the decarbonization of the industry and some of those new skill sets was also part of the work that we did with DNV. So looking at lots of different areas that will impact the industry's ability. So for example, the skills and competencies to handle complex maritime operations, safety and skills and competencies, and so on. So informed by the report, delivered by DNV, the Just Transition Maritime Task Force prepared what you can see on this next screen, a 10-point action plan. So we essentially broke down into different actionable areas, fields in which we as a task force can begin to make a difference in one way or another, to make sure that we're preparing seafarers already today, starting today, for the transition that is to come. And I will get to the specific points of action later on in the presentation. So I guess having spoken broadly about the work of the task force, I think it's probably fitting, given that this is being hosted in South Africa. I went to school in South Africa, so I love the place. Let's look at what actually all of this means in terms of Africa. So if we look at the ICS Seafarer Workforce Report, which we release every 5 years, we're expecting a shortfall of around 90,000 officers by 2026. So what this means is that our levels of recruitment will need to really step up if we're going to avoid a shortage. Added to that is the impact of COVID-19. For many reasons, including the crew change crisis, many seafarers decided that they would seek other opportunities elsewhere. But shipping was by no means the only industry to suffer from that, but certainly we were hugely affected by it. And then you add the conflict in Ukraine, as you can see in the figures there. Both Ukraine and Russia make up nearly 15% of the global workforce. So the conflict has impacted the ability of ship owners employing Russian and Ukrainian seafarers. Not that that's not possible, it is possible, but it has had an impact on that. In terms of the seafaring behemoth of the industry, the Philippines remains the largest supplier of seafarers globally, but its share has gone from around 20% to now 14.4%, as you can see on the screen. But I'll add that the Philippines understands and appreciates just what a hugely important industry this is for them. And as you can see in the next bullet point, in 2019 alone, 380,000 Filipino seafarers contributed some 6.5 billion to the Philippine economy. But with all of these things considered, one thing that the pandemic has done is it has spurred ship owners to really try and diversify the talent pool. And I think if you look at Africa in general, South Africa has actually been one of the biggest strategic beneficiaries of it, with companies such as Maersk announcing new programs. Our good friends at the International Maritime Employers Council were in South Africa also earlier this year to establish their own program, and Norwegian shipping company Klaveness also has a program in South Africa. So they're very much looking to South Africa for leadership in terms of developing those seafaring leaders of the future. But thinking beyond South Africa and Africa more generally, I guess the one question I would pose: could a potential global center of excellence for seafarer training be based in Africa, in the not too distant future, leveraging shipping's transition and other factors to bring more jobs and wider economic benefits for the continent? So something I would like to leave with you to think about. And I think in this area, I point out, slightly away from South Africa, but a few things that are happening in other parts of the continent in terms of maritime education and training. So we've got the regional university in Ghana, we've got the training center in Abidjan as well. But from our perspective, these are not necessarily as joined up as they could potentially be. So is there a way that there can be synergies to make sure that that can be achieved? What role does the AIM 2050 strategy of the African Union have to play in this? And indeed, is there a wider role for the African Union to make sure that this is a reality? So I think on this part, remaining with the African context, we've got a list, and this is based on the 2021 ICS BIMCO Seafarer Workforce Report, as I've mentioned. We've got a list of the countries in Africa and the number of officers and ratings that they have. In total, we're looking at around over 27,000 officers. And in terms of ratings, we're talking about nearly 50,000 for a grand total of 77,500 seafarers. But when you compare that with the Philippines, that in 2019 had 300,000, you can see that, that there's room there. And given all those different pressure points that I highlighted in the previous slide, there's certainly an opportunity there for Africa as a continent, South Africa as an individual nation, to try and leverage these opportunities as much as possible. So I guess these are some things that I would like to leave with you to consider in terms of what challenges, what some of those current challenges it comes when it comes to training maritime professionals in Africa. How can we overcome that? There's different companies, as I mentioned already, doing stuff in South Africa, for instance, but Africa more broadly, can there be a holistic approach to ensure that the right outcomes are achieved? And another important question is the green transition. How can we make it much more inclusive? How can we bring along women and just a diverse pool of seafarers for the future? So this takes me to the next steps of what we're aiming to achieve with the Maritime Just Transition Task Force. Based on the 10-point action plan that I outlined a few slides ago, we are now breaking the task force's, what we call a global peer learning group, made up of different training institutions and education providers and shipping companies and seafarer representatives and organizations. And we're going to divide them into separate groups. One group will be looking at recruitment and retention, because if we're struggling with recruitment and retention now, given the challenges that we're expecting come 2050 and beyond, we really need to start putting in the infrastructure now. One of the recommendations that we outline in our 10-point action plan is the development of maritime skills councils to monitor skills, but it could look beyond that. For example, in the Philippines, we as ICS and a number of industry partners met with the president of the Philippines in Brussels last year. And off the back of that, and given some of the wider issues impacting Filipino seafaring, they've established this international advisory body, which I'm a part of, and we're able to feed in strategic advice to policymakers in that way. And then the third one is related to seafarer training, and there was mention of cooperation with the International Maritime Organization and WMU. And I think we're involved in that as well. We'll be meeting with IMO next week to finalize what that means. So I think I can leave it there. Thank you very much for listening, and happy to take your questions. And apologies for the slow technology. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vincenti. Are there any questions? One question. Get a microphone, please.
Thank you, Mr. Vicente, or Dr. Vicente, I'm not sure.
Mr.
Okay, thanks. My name is Nyati, I'm from the Cape. I wanted to find out what will be the interplay between the Munin concept, the unmanned vessel concept, and the plethora of issues that you have raised, if any. Due to that, you have mentioned societal issues and employment aspects, and I've been involved academically in the Munich unmanned vessel side of things, and I just want to know what impact will that have, or what is the interplay between the two, if any, and what will be your response to such an inquiry? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really good question, actually, and I think among ship owners, shipping has been increasingly digital. It's nothing new. So we try to take a very sober approach to digitalization. There are benefits to digitalization, but we did a report. We conducted a research along the Hamburg School of Business a few years ago, and I know that the International Transport Forum, the International Transport Workers Federation, did one as well alongside WMU, also quite recently. And where there was a point of commonality was, yes, ships are becoming increasingly digital. IMO does need to work on this, and they are looking at this through the different committees. But the one thing that is vitally important to understand is that we need seafarers today, and we will need them for the foreseeable future. And I think we must continue to reiterate that really loudly and really proudly, because we're struggling to get the numbers of seafarers that we need. Come 2050, we will still need people on board. We really will. I have no doubt about that. So ship owners tend to be quite practical about this. Seafarers are needed. It's just making sure that they have the adequate training and familiarization to be able to cope with the technology. So it's not just isolated to decarbonization, but actually when it comes to the digital journey of the industry, we need to make sure that seafarers come along with us on that journey.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think let's move on to the panel discussions. We are slightly behind schedule, so I'd like to introduce the moderator for the social panel discussion. That's Captain John Lloyd, the Nautical Institute CEO. I've got a little bio that I need to read out to you guys. John joined the Nautical Institute from the Australian Maritime College in Tasmania, where he was the professor in the National Centre for Ports and Shipping. During his 7 years at the AMC, he had 2 years leave of absence to set up the Angolan Maritime Training Centre. Before joining AMC, he spent 2 years working in the Vanuatu Maritime College. John's varied career prior to these appointments include 4 years in senior positions with the flagship training in the UK, 10 years with Warsash Maritime Centre as a senior and principal lecturer in simulation and operations, and 2 years as a marine pilot in Walvis Bay. He served at sea from 1975 for 16 years, gaining command in 1987. John is going to be joined by Mr. Vincenti and Captain Lagobert, and Ken Elam, General Manager for Solus Marine Consultants, and Oysen Jensen from Odgeveld. Over to you, John.
David, thank you very much indeed. And I just want to say I wish I had a CV that you could have used like for Nick Sloan. You know, I aspire to that level of experience, but I'll keep working on it. And a warm welcome to you all. And I'm sorry I can't be there in person. Special congratulations to those of you sporting the NI 50th anniversary tie today. It's great to be here. I'm going to start by going to Ken Elam, and ask him to introduce himself, and then just a comment in terms of that what we were hearing there, Ken, about the development of skills for the future and your commentary around the existing skills that you see in the workplace.
Thanks very much, John, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm still stuck in Indonesia, just having come off a casualty. So I am the general manager of Solus Marine in Singapore, And a lot of my focus in terms of work is I'm an SCR. I deal with a lot of casualty management in Southeast Asia and a lot of navigation incidents as well. So I see pretty much the bad side of most. So John, yes, I think in the area where I work, we have an interesting comparison where you have Singapore on the one hand, which is a leading flag state. Their port infrastructure is world class. They are working towards an autonomous port in the new Tuas megaport that's coming in. The MPA is very much engaged in developing and making sure that the Singapore Straits and the traffic separation scheme is fit for purpose going forward with the Tuas megaport coming online. And what we have around Singapore is we have, and I'm just going to say Southeast Asian countries. So we have this wonderful mix of, world-class LNG tankers, coming through the Singapore Strait, passenger ships, large VLCCs, everything that you can think of comes through the Singapore Straits. In fact, there's about 2,500 vessels that pass the Singapore Straits every day. And what also crosses the Singapore Straits, not only all the passenger ferries running between Singapore and Batam, but a lot of tug and barge combinations. These are low horsepower tugs, 2,500 bhp, towing large 100-meter or 300-foot deck cargo barges, which are either laden with containers going from the container ports in Singapore across to ports in Indonesia, or other breakbulk products. Sand is one of them that's shipped around here quite a lot. Coal also gets moved through the strait. And obviously on these vessels, we have a completely different standard with regards to the training of the seafarers. And I won't say competence, but the way that they manage the ships, the interest in the companies in safety management, they all sit below 499 gross tons. So ISM doesn't really apply to that. They have a magic wand that they wave at an ISM file and call it that, but it's just not followed. And when you go on board to investigate these, you'll often come across problems where you ask for the passage plan and you'll get shown a bunch of waypoints on a piece of A4 paper folded in half, lying underneath the chart table, which contains charts which are out of date. There's no nautical publications on board for that particular point. Record keeping is substandard. They'll have checklists all printed out nicely, which are filled in with whiteboard marker, and you'll find that the last date that the checklist was filled in was maybe 3 or 4 months ago. So these are the kind of issues that we face, and probably the most recent sort of eye-opener that I have is going on board vessels and watching them navigate around Singapore using a mobile phone with a pirated CMAP application on the phone, and they're following the waypoints that they're putting on that. So those are some of the kinds of issues that we see in Southeast Asia, and obviously training in these other countries really has to go a long way. They all do comply. All the officers do sit with proper certificates of competency, things like that. But clearly there's a huge gap between what we see coming through the straits on high class, first port vessels and the local vessels trading in the area.
Ken, they're really useful insights. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm delighted you managed to get a good internet connection for today's session. So just to keep the conversation going, and I'm going to come to the president respectfully in just a moment. But if anyone who's online has got a question, please don't hesitate to throw it in the chat or to raise your hand, and we'll see how we can go. And if anyone in the room, David, wants to interrupt, just give me a shout, and we'll divert there. But Andre, you described the work that you do. You meet a lot of different seafarers. You lead a lot of different ship types and so on. And part of Helio's presentation there was about just transition and opportunity. What would be your observations in the context of just transition and, if you like, that opportunity for professional development that you see from the people that you interact with? And we can't hear you online, Andre. I may be able to hear you in the room.
My apologies, John. Can you hear me now?
Yep, yep. Great, thanks.
Okay, I can't repeat what I just said about you. John, I just want to mention, I probably should have done in my initial presentation, but I work for a company called AET, or as you probably know them better as Eagle Star. And I've just got to say that this is a company in the forefront of green shipping, but also explain that I'm here today representing the Nautical Institute as president, and the views I'm saying today are my own views, not those of the company. I don't represent them here, but I'm particularly proud of working for a company that is really at the cutting edge of green shipping at the moment. I'm on board ships, as I explained to you earlier today, regularly, between 9 and 15 ships in a month. And I see a lot going on, and some of these are greener ships. And I've already spoken to you there, John, about putting cadets on board these ships. But looking around the room, I know many. I wonder how many of you remember your first ship? Do you think you could? Yeah, I can see lots of people nodding. Could you still find your way around your first ship? Absolutely you could, and so could I. And it was before the Port Chalmers. So let's put these cadets on the ships. They only have to do 12 months sea time. And then they go up to college and they take their second mates or their junior watchkeeping fourth engineer certificates, and they can come back on your ships fully qualified. I did a trip on a 33 tank product carrier as a cadet. I went back to college, took my second mate's ticket, and I came back as third mate. And I knew exactly what I was doing, even if I was a first trip third mate, loading 8 crates of cargo into those 33 tanks. So that's one of the things we have to do, is we have to train, and then we have to retain. So train and retain. Companies need to step up. You're investing in the future. Invest in the training and pay for the cadets, pay for the junior ratings, pay for the people on board your ship, and then pay them properly and retain them. Now, John, another thing I see when I'm at sea regularly is how much control there is from ashore. Yeah, people agreeing with me again in the room. I can hear that. It's quite an emotive subject, but communication is absolutely great on board the ships now. You can communicate with a ship instantly anywhere in the world. And many people have moved ashore from the ships. Their career has transitioned to ashore. But you've moved ashore and you certainly know what a ship is. We respect that. But do you actually know how these brand new cutting edge technology ships work? Or are you talking about ships of the past? Things are changing so rapidly that it's unlikely that people ashore know how the latest ships work. You have to rely on your ship staff, your senior people on board. They're the ones who know. So let's go back to relying on the captains and relying on the chief engineers and what they're saying. Just, if I may, John, just for a moment, give you a quick example of that. I was on board a ship, not one of my companies, but another company recently, where they were printing out passage plans from the ECDIS. And every passage plan was an A4 folder, which they were storing in a room. And I said to the second mate, I said, God, why are you doing that? That's a real step back. And he said, because an auditor requires it. They require them. He could not read how the passage plan was developed on the ECDIS, so he required the vessel to print it. And they were continuing to print it and store them in this room, and the room was filling up very rapidly. And finally, I just have to mention, Helio, just great listening to you again. But you say you're struggling to get seafarers. Well, myself and many at the Nautical Institute are struggling to find places for cadets and for junior officers. Where's the disconnect? And what can we do about it? I believe it's the maritime colleges are the link between the two, but it's certainly something we must develop. Thank you, John.
Oh, you're very welcome, Andre. Don't you ever consider using 2 minutes when you've got 10 available? That's what I say. And I always say we're in sort of Europe together, and we're not in the same room, which means I can ask you difficult questions. And what I'm going to put to you is that Helio really focused on this cliff wall, this tidal wave of training requirement that's coming towards us for hundreds of thousands of seafarers. And I guess what I'm trying to understand is how, if I understood what you're saying earlier, you're concentrating on in-ship efficiencies, better routing, better hull form, you know, economical steaming. At what point do you think the industry is going to have the courage to grasp the bullet and actually start training our seafarers for the next generation of fuels? And you know, where do we get that direction from?
Well, I think that if I had the perfect answer to that, then there would be a lot of people that would be very happy, I guess. But so I need to disappoint you that I don't have a perfect answer to that. As mentioned, we are focusing on energy efficiencies. And that means that we need to do whatever we can with everything that we have on board. And we're trying to enable all our seafarers also to look at their suggestions on how we can improve both on environmental and social governance, everything from handling waste and safety on board. But it will come to a point where we need to look at that alternative fuel. And as an alternative fuel, I mentioned it also earlier, was ammonia as an example. Ammonia is highly toxic, so that is going to be very challenging. But I would also like to say that we are transporting today chemicals on board our vessels that are much more toxic than any other alternatives available on as a fuel. And we are handling that 365 days with all our 80 vessels all around the world all the time. So I think it's manageable. I think that we have seen that we have been able to train our crew to work with highly complex and advanced products when we travel them as a product. Of course, we need to also develop the skills on how to handle it from a technical side when you're using some of those products as fuel. I think that that will have to be developed, and we need to do all of these things in parallel, right? So we need to have the regulation in place, we need to have the training in place. But I think that I think we need to try to focus on solutions and having the sort of intention that we will make this work, because there's a lot of companies looking at all the barriers, all the problems, all the changes and all the issues. And if everyone is just focusing on that, we will not move forward. So I think that it is important for us as an industry to say that, okay, we will do this. We will be able, we need to have an alternative fuel and we need to make this. We need to make our training programs. So I think that from our perspectives, we have not taken that decision yet because we don't see that we will bring these fuels on board immediately. But I think that we will quite soon start to look at what are we going to do with regards to our training. We have been very close look at our seafarers. We follow the seafarers from dedicated universities. We have seafarers from a lot of them are from the Philippines. We have also cadets from South Africa, actually. Through the empowerment program there. So I think that it is important for us to make sure that they are able to handle any kind of products safe, and it's our responsibility to make sure that they are able to handle any fuel safe. So our perspective on decarbonization is that we will need to have green fuel capable engines on board, and that means that there will have to be adjustments to those engines to make them capable of burning also alternative fuel. So it's our responsibility to make sure that they are ready for that.
No, thank you so much, and I think you made a really important point there, is that companies like Odfjell have got experience already. They have the opportunity of helping others develop solutions for training and so on, and I think that's really important. I think one area I might differ slightly is that if we wait for regulations, and particularly if we're going to put regulations through the IMO, we know that there is a danger of glacial speed of progression here, and I do think that there is room for increased influence from industry codes of practice, from leaders, from organizations like yours and other operators who are already setting the standard, to work with organizations like the Nautical Institute, as we do with dynamic positioning, to be able to find ways in which we can implement harmonized standards in a more agile way. But thank you, and really important point that actually we have been doing this for quite a while in some sectors, and there's much that we can learn from that. Helio, you've heard some feedback from your really interesting presentation, particularly Andre's comments there around the disconnect between the people looking for training opportunities and the loud cries of shortfalls of seafarers. Do you have some commentary around that?
Yes, I can respond to that, and I'm glad that we've been able to have this discussion. I think, Andre, you made a very good point about training centers and how hugely important those are, and I think that is one of the areas we need to focus on. I think one of the elements I highlighted in my presentation was the lack of availability of competent trainers in the scale that we need to train the huge number of seafarers that we need to train. So getting things started now is vitally important. So we're having the conversations, and in terms of the next phase of the task force, we're trying to get really practical about, okay, how do we put some of these elements into play? But to contextualize this a little bit better, I was in the Philippines in November last year, and we went to visit the Norwegian Training Center in Manila, which is one of the state-of-the-art centers, and a wonderful tour and so on. And then I asked the head of the center how many training centers around the world did he think, to his knowledge, there were of a similar standard, and he said probably around 6. So we're looking at less than 10. So that really does highlight, that we as an industry need to prioritize this for today, for yesterday, really.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And for those of you who haven't had a look at the chat, Anne Pleshka has made some really good points that as we train people, it isn't just about tomorrow. There's also important stuff today, and particularly about well-being and psychological safety. And what I can say is watch this space for some stuff from the Nautical Institute in the coming couple of months or so. So thank you for that. David, I'm going to come to you. Are there any questions from the room that I should be alert to?
There's a hand. Mike Melly.
Yep.
Thank you. Through the chair, okay, I am Mike Melly. Until recently, December, I held command. Before retiring from that, before retiring and taking command, I was working in an office as a fleet mentor, amongst other things. Just to reflect back on my last couple of years of experience, I have sailed with a number of South Africans, and my personal experience, as well as that which has been shared with me by other masters, has been that the quality of the candidates that we are getting out of South Africa in particular at the moment has been excellent, and that we're basically going back to enjoy the reputation that South African seafarers enjoyed 30, 40 years back, which was a great international reputation. Now, that's interesting because the demand for South Africans is growing exponentially at the moment. We've only heard about Maersk. I'm delighted to hear that Oddfellow are taking on South African cadets, and of course, there are other companies as well. But in the last month or two, other opportunities have come to light, and they're growing rapidly. I would estimate, in fact, that by the end of next year, we're probably looking at a demand for something in the order of 200 cadets coming through, which is excellent. Industry is turning, is changing. Now, I love what I've been hearing from all the presenters up to now. We do need to look at our training systems. First of all, we need government to start investing in our training. We need companies to start investing. We need to start having a really good look at our systems. There's a plethora of STCW colleges offering a lot of courses, which we're spending a lot of money on, and yet we're missing some of the really important things. I'm talking about navigation. We heard Ken talking about his nightmare experiences of passage plans. and that's not unusual. So I'd also talk on, I'd also call on industry to get behind start investing in the training industry and start training cadets for, giving them the skills that they need, including the green technology that's coming through. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Mike. So we've managed, David, to use up nearly all the time, including the coffee break. I'm quite happy to pause there, or to pause some more questions from the audience. I'll defer to you, sir.
I think the consensus is a coffee break.
Okay. Can I thank my panel members and say thank you very much for responding in an agile and courteous fashion to my very rude questions. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate that, and I shall see you after coffee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've gone over the coffee break, so I think what we should do is just extend our time for the start of the next session a couple of minutes. So if you're all happy to do that, if we can start, we take a break now and then start up again at 16:30. All okay with that? Thank you. Maritime Energy Management Specialization, the MSc program. He served as the editor-in-chief of the World Maritime University Journal of Maritime Affairs and book series from 2017 to 2019. Prior to joining the World Maritime University, he worked at Newcastle University, the University of Strathclyde, and Istanbul Technical University in the fields of naval architecture and marine engineering. Played an important role in Newcastle University's first international branch in Singapore to help the university achieve its objectives for undergrad and postgrad programs in maritime technology. For many years, he's conducted research and independently, jointly, and collaborated with other researchers, academics, and students all over the world, in particular from Europe and Asia. Dr. Olcho was involved in numerous EU and IMO projects, as well as IAMU and regional projects in Scandinavia. He's published results of his research in a number of leading international peer-reviewed journals, and is the main editor of the book Trends and Challenges in Maritime Energy Management, which is one of the most downloaded Springer books in 2018. He's delivered keynote speeches all over the world, in particular in the discipline of maritime decarbonization. We welcome Professor Olcho to present the journey towards zero, low carbon and energy efficient maritime future. Professor.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, moderator. Let me share my presentation, please. I presume you see my first slide? Yeah. And the slideshow, do you see?
Yes, it's all good. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for the kind invitation. As already introduced by the moderator, my name is Aykut Ölçer. I'm a naval architect and marine engineer. I'm working for the World Maritime University. For those of you who are not familiar, World Maritime University, in short WMU, was established by IMO in 1983, especially for the maritime professional coming from developing country, with a main mandate of capacity building. So title is Journey, because it's really journey with solution, a journey with barriers, journey trying to understand how to overcome those barriers, and how to decarbonize international shipping in particular, along with, for example, the domestic shipping, which was already highlighted by one of my colleagues at the beginning of this symposium. So basically it is a journey, and it is definitely a lot of the pillars which are all working in a harmony. It's a multifaceted, the journey we will be discussing today, hopefully in this particular session. So I always start with my famous slide. Is there any ship with zero emission? So basically the answer is yes. There are basically ships definitely operating with zero emission, but at the end of the day, challenges, and definitely today, as you can see from this slide, this ship doesn't perform any work. So when it comes to a real work, especially the work performed by the ocean-going vessel, unfortunately we rely on fossil fuel. As already highlighted previous speaker, Mr. Jensen, the seaborne transportation is the most efficient fuel of transportation. However, if you do not do anything now, or if you do not act now, and definitely this is one of the most polluted transportation mode in the near future, according to the EU report, according to some research. So it is definitely the most fuel efficient mode of transportation. So when it comes to environmentally friendly, this is a separate discussion. But as you can see from this slide, IMO has, for the last 4 years, 3 out of for the last IMO maritime team is focusing on green aspect. So 2021, it was new technologies for greener shipping. And this year is MARPOL at 50, and our commitment goes on. And the 2002 year, it was sustainable shipping for a sustainable planning. So it's not a coincidence that IMO has chosen this title for the last 3 years, 3 out of the last 4 years. So we are now in a green era, and definitely society perception change, and the society is also putting pressure on us to become greener. So, but amongst the negative externalities seaborne transportation is producing, air pollution, of course, the occupying an important place, or the important, let's say, the share. And the negative externalities produced by the seaborne transportation, and most of them are already regulated by IMO. And in terms of, let's say, responding to the negative externalities, some of them are already mature, like ballast water related discussions, or when there is an accident, oil spill related, the regulation and the rules. One of the latest one is the underwater noise is at the moment the guideline, but very soon, maybe 5 to 10 years time, it will be a regulation. Air pollution amongst those is the, let's say, again, the most important aspect, is not easy to deal with, and definitely the hot aspect. And air pollution is very much linked to energy aspects on board ships. So the way we produce and the way we consume, and this is very much linked to how much we pollute the environment, how much we emit in the form of air pollution. So in particular, maritime decarbonization, of course, but the way we call it at WMU and academically speaking, we refer to call it the maritime energy management. At the end of the day, the things we do is managing the energy. And climate change, I will not definitely touch upon what is happening. According to IPCC expert, the anthropogenic or the human-made, the involvement or the interaction is definitely causing climate change. And it causes sea level rise, weather pattern changes, affects the immigration of the animals and the fishes in the oceans, and so on and so forth. So climate change is happening, and it was already addressed in the relevant United Nations platforms. And according to United Nations or UNFCCC, basically we have to limit the global warming to well below 2 Celsius, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. So this was basically reflected in the 2015 Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement doesn't touch upon the international shipping in the aviation because it is the jurisdiction of the IMO and the ICAO. However, it is reflected in the form of nationally determined contribution, which is linked to maritime onshore facilities of the states, such as ports and the shipyards. So with that motivation, with that, let's say, good pressure, the IMO, of course, responded in the form of an IMO initial GHG strategy. But before this, let me highlight these 6 motivational drivers which is affecting what we do in the seaborne transportation. And these are the motivational drivers. These are the drivers for us to become more energy cautious. The first one is the air pollution we produce with 2 categories, air pollutants and the GHGs, is definitely causing climate change. And this is something we have to do immediately. So GHG causing the climate change, air pollutants causing the human element. Maybe it is important to highlight one thing here, or open a parenthesis. Of course, we today discuss mainly the maritime decarbonization, but whatever we do on the air pollutant side is also positive impact on the decarbonization side as well. The challenge for the decarbonization side, as of today, there is no silver bullet technology to remove the carbon content or to basically decarbonize maritime operation as of today. There is no such a technology or practice. So that's why all the discussion are led to energy efficiency, which is leading to the decreased carbon content of what we do. Second driver is there in the regulation? Yes, the MARPOL Annex 6, Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 are the regulation for us to become more energy cautious. And there is already journey from Kyoto Protocol to Paris Agreement. And the Paris Agreement, the Paris Agreement pressure as reflected in the IMO GHG strategy, which will be revised this year, MEPC 80, during the July 2023. Volatile fuel prices, 10 years ago it was cheap, today the high, and tomorrow we don't know. So this volatility and the fluctuation character can be also easily handled or cope with this energy cautious mentality and the mindset. World population is the main driver for everything what we do. So more people means more energy demand and definitely thereby the more energy prices. Energy resources scarcity, what we consume today, and then we will not be able to use them within the next 100, 150 years time. So basically we have to consume them and we have to use them definitely in a more energy efficient way. Last but not the least, there is an agenda which is affecting what we do, United Nations 2030 agenda, in particular SDG 7, clean energy for all, and the SDG 13, the climate action. So these are the 6 main drivers for us to become energy cautious so that we might be able to reduce the air pollution from seaborne operations, seaborne transportation. What is IMO response? IMO responded, and as part of the MARPOL Annex 6 regulation, Chapter 3, which is dealing with the air pollutants and the ones you see in this slide, and also the Chapter 4, which is more on the efficiency side. And in the next slide, this slide, I will be definitely looking into the response in more detail. So basically, the whole aim when it comes to the IMO response, we need a better design. We need better operations. So better design is reflected in the form of an index called Energy Efficiency Design Index. This is also reflected for the existing ship, which is now called as the Energy Efficiency Existing Index. So both same formula, but different applications. So how about better operations? For better operations, now we have a plan called Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan. And also recently, especially this year, it came to force, carbon intensity indicators. And also there is another element of this plan as in the form of part 3, data collection system. And in order to be able to come up with an economic measures in the future, which is definitely necessary and which is definitely the way forward, especially in the medium term. So we need to know how much we pollute the environment, how much fuel we consume. So that's why data collection system is a kind of interim step for near future, midterm, the economic measures. And of course, IMO initial GHG strategy is kind of an umbrella and overarching strategy, which is also including the element we discuss here. According to IMO initial GHG strategy, the vision is phasing out GHG emissions from international shipping as soon as possible in this century. And there are 3 levels of ambition. And level ambition of 1 is we have to further strengthen the energy efficiency design requirements for ship by using the existing technologies and the practices. And the level of ambition 2 is by 2030, we have to reduce the CO2 emission per transport work, which is called carbon intensity, by at least 40% and pursuing efforts towards 70% by 2050 compared to 2008 levels. And the last ambition level of ambition 3 is the 2050 year, the year 2050. We have to reduce the total annual GHG emission by at least 50% compared to 2008 levels. This strategy will be revised this year. And there is also another important element. So whatever the technologies and the solution we have, we need to always look into the impact of those technologies and the practices, especially least developed countries and the small island developing states. This is also in the agenda of IMO in this year and in the years to come. And if you reflect those ambitious targets in this graphic, as you can see, if you see my cursor, and then 40% carbon intensity reduction by 2030 and 70% reduction by 2050. Are those the ambitious targets? 40% to a certain extent can be achievable, at least for certain ship types. But when we start to say 70% when it comes to carbon intensity, with the technologies and the know-how we have today, it is not possible. Near future, it might be possible, but of course, we have to discuss, and then we have to work together to be able to find those solutions. Is it market-based measure? Is it ammonia? Is it hydrogen? Is it an alternative fuel? And these are the discussions we are all having as part of this symposium and also in the academic community. Finding answer is not easy. Finding is not easy, but of course we have to work together to be able to find a kind of a global solution for this global challenge. And those measures are categorized as short-term measures. Short-term measures are the one we are using as of today. Mid-term measures is the one between 2023 and 2030, and which will be also discussed what will be the mid-term measures and in this year MEPC. And the long-term measures are definitely the carbon-free fuels. But carbon-free fuels has a lot of a lot of pros, but at the end of the day, a lot of cons as well. Previous speaker already touched upon a few of them: safety-related aspect, and infrastructure-related aspect, future price, and many more. And definitely, there is no one solution fits all. But in summary, long-term measures will be these carbon-free fuels, whether it would be a biofuel, ammonia, hydrogen, may also many other near alternative fuels coming to the market. So IMO's ongoing work in this respect in 5 pillars. And as also highlighted by the previous speaker, we have to always look into the life cycle aspect rather than focusing on present and what we do within a kind of a borders, within a kind of a restricted borders. So if you just say ship, okay, we might be able to make some improvements and significant improvements. But when it comes to how the fuel cell operate, how the fuel cell are produced, or how the basically ammonia produced, including blue and green, so definitely the solution is not that simple or not straightforward. We need to take into consideration the life cycle aspect and the dimension. So that's why life cycle GHG emission guidelines is definitely one of the important elements in the agenda of IMO. Safety aspects of the low carbon fuels, definitely. And the further enhancement of the IMO's mandatory data collection system, which might be leading to future, the economic measures, and the development of the midterm measures, including the assessment of the impacts on the states, is not highlighted here, but also the definitely it's already highlighted. So yeah, it's development of the midterm measures, and definitely the whatever we develop, impact of what we developed on the definitely small island developing states, which are mostly affected by the climate change. So these are the, let's say, 5 items of the IMO this year and in the years to come. And this is a self-explanatory slide. I will share my slides with the audience. So that's why I'm just keeping this slide. Do we have solutions? We have a lot of solutions, from ship level to fleet level, from hydrodynamics to engine, from propeller to all the way to the logistic. So from incentives to voyage optimization. Are they mature technologies? Some of them are more mature compared to the other ones. For example, the operational related aspects like trim optimization and ballast water exchange related the processes, or the voyage optimization, slope steaming, and the communication between port and the ships like virtual arrival, or advanced propeller, or the perseveral devices, or the perseveral devices is a long list. So these are all the, let's say, technologies and the practices we have today, and definitely helping us to become more energy efficient. But the combination of them are enough for what we are trying to achieve. For some ship types like container ships, yes, we are in the right direction, but for some ship types, it might not be enough to achieve all these ambitious targets of IMO. Now, I will call it fourth propulsion revolution. So if you look in the right side of the slide, you see some S-curves. So when there is a new technology comes into the market, every technology follows an S-curve. Technology is born, technology grows and reaches to a certain limit. So you cannot go beyond. And there might be some basic, the marginal improvements over the years. So in this respect, we started with sailing ships. Then we came up with the steam technology. And then we added later on top of the paddle driven vessels, we added the propellers. And the steam and the propellers all the way went to the limit of the steam-driven ships. Now, with the invention of the diesel technology, diesel engines, and the diesel engines started to a new technology or the new S-curve, and they also reached to a limit. And their thermal efficiency around 50%. So basically, when you burn the fuel, you lose half of it at the very beginning in the form of heat and exhaust. And due to the further losses like the mechanical losses and the losses originating from propeller hull interaction, and because of this, you lose further 25%. So basically, if the bunker is 100, around 70% you lose due to the efficiency losses. Today, do we have another technology? No, diesel engine is the most efficient technology as of today to be able to help us to perform seaborne transportation. What are the technologies? We talk about fuel cell, we talk about batteries. Yes, they are environmental friendly technologies if you exclude the life cycle analysis of those technologies. So suppose that they are the most environmental friendly technologies. Are their capacities enough to propel a ship solely? No. Small scale, yes. There are already ships in this region. Between Sweden and Denmark, there are already the small ships, small passenger vessels operating on a small nautical mile, and then definitely it's driven by the batteries. But when it comes to long distance and the ocean-going vessels, unfortunately, and there is no such a kind of a technological maturity yet to be able to propel those big ships with fuel cell and batteries. Ammonia hydrogen technologically in theory is possible, but of course engine manufacturers are working on the ammonia-driven and hydrogen-driven ICs, internal combustion engines. So they will be in the market soon or basically in the very near future. But would it be efficient? How about the infrastructure, the ammonia price or the future fuel price? And also the engine efficiencies. These are the questions we don't know the answer yet. Nuclear, as being myself naval architect, definitely is a very promising, very safe, and a very clean option. Maybe not the uranium, but on thorium-based and energy production might be definitely a way forward in the years to come for seaborne transportation. Renewables is there, definitely very promising. And just 100 years ago, we were sailing with wind energy. Of course, today ships are big and the speed is also bigger compared to 100 years ago. So that's why renewable energy potential is there. Unfortunately, they might be helpful only to support the auxiliaries at the moment. So future, there is no single technology which will be following an S-curve, which you can see in the slide, the right part of the slide. So definitely the future is hybrid. So but what will be the combination for each hybrid? So when it comes to hybrid, the right combination of the technologies and the solutions, definitely it has to be the ship specific. And later I will highlight in my conclusion slide, and the hybrid solutions or the right combination has to be ship specific, has to be shipping company specific, or has to be member state specific, or has to be route specific. So there is no one solution or the one right combination fits all. In this respect, the way we appreciate, the way we understand, the way we analyze, and the way we propose at WMU, the maritime energy management and maritime decarbonization needs to have a holistic approach, which needs to have the key thematic areas from energy efficiency to regulatory framework, from renewable energy to human element, from economics to technology and innovation. So these key thematic areas needs to work together in a harmony to be able to a holistic solution for what we discussed today. And once we do, or while we are doing this, we have to do this within a life cycle perspective. So amongst these key thematic areas is definitely most of the time we look into technology. Definitely we need an innovative technology, a game changer, which will decarbonize what we do. But is it enough? No. At the end of the day, human element is important and education is important. We need future maritime leaders. We need future ocean leaders. Capacity building important. Why? Because is not the developed country challenge. It is the challenge of the whole world. So in this respect, this global challenge needs to be met by the global cooperation. So whatever we know, we have to pass the know-how to developing countries through capacity building. Economics is the most important part. Whatever the technology we come up at the end of the day, it has to be commercially viable. So the point I'm trying to make here, at the end of the day, the solution lies in or falls into the holistic and the transdisciplinary dimension. So it has to be a holistic and the transdisciplinary approach we have to take to be able to decarbonize the seaborne transportation. In this respect, the way forward, the first one I already highlighted, we need to see the things in a more holistic manner. And then we need to see the things across the disciplines, from economics to engineering, from regulatory aspects to from law aspects, regulatory aspects, and all the way to human element. And we have to consider the right combination of the pillars of the holistic view, with a special focus on, of course, innovation and capacity building. And before all these things, individual level, we need to have a mindset change and the paradigm shift. The best example I always use in my classes, basically, so if we are able to eat a local fruit, there is no point to eat fruit from another continent. Of course, this basically triggers other discussion, world trade related discussion, and so on and so forth. But if we do not take any action on the individual level, so we should not be expecting anything from a global level. So it starts with us, with our children, then all the way to international shipping. As I highlighted, global cooperation is very important. Global cooperation amongst all stakeholders, global cooperation between developed countries and the developed countries, especially LDCs and the SIDS. As already highlighted, life cycle perspective is the most important perspective within the energy chain and within the maritime supply chain. Last but not the least, we need to invest on future maritime leaders. So at the end of the day, who designed the ships? Human beings. Who makes decisions? Human beings. Who develop policies? Human beings. So that's why we need to really invest on future maritime leaders. And World Maritime University can be considered as a role model to serve for that purpose. While we are doing all these things, we have to empower women in the maritime industry, and also we need to be build more resilience for the disruptions such as COVID-19 and many, let's say, foreseen disruptions we will be having in the near future. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you very much, Professor. We're going to move straight on to the panel discussion. Time is moving past quite rapidly. So I'm going to introduce the moderator and the panelists, all online for this last session. So we're very privileged to welcome Ambassador Nancy Karigitu, Kenya's Special Envoy, Maritime and Blue Economy, and candidate to the IMO Secretary General. Ambassador Karigitu is a maritime law expert with vast experience spanning 37 years, marked with exemplary leadership in the fields of maritime administration and commercial shipping in both government and private sector. She served as the Director General of the Kenyan Maritime Authority from 2009 to 2015, in charge of the day-to-day management and operation of the authority, and was also responsible for advising and implementing the government's maritime policy and represented Kenya at the IMO and other international fora. During this time, Kenya attained key milestones as a maritime player in East Africa and the West Indian Ocean region. In 2007, Ambassador Karigitu was privileged to champion the launch of the Association for Women in the Maritime Sector in Eastern and Western Africa, which brings together women maritime professionals to mentor and encourage new female entrants into the sector, as well as lobby for their training and promotion. In addition to her current duties, she serves as a member of the Board of Governors of the World Maritime University based in Malmö, Sweden. The ambassador is joined by the Professor Olcher, Captain John Lloyd, and Mr. Vincenti for this last panel discussion.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Let me start by acknowledging the organizers of this event and congratulating the Institute on attainment of 50 years and for having called us together today to discuss such a very important topic. Now, I'm glad that the panelists I have are very well known to you, and we've heard from both of them in previous sessions, the three of them in previous session, including immediately the professor. And our role here this time is very, very clear. Professor has given us the journey towards zero or low carbon and energy efficient maritime future. And from what we've gathered, we have a very clear and tight deadline to achieve decarbonization. And for this, we have to be both intentional and proactive. And therefore, we don't have much time. We also have to ensure that we are equitably sharing the costs and also opportunities that are central to this transition. And we also see that collaboration and other mechanisms will be needed, but that we must pursue the solutions at a global level and make sure that they are embraced by all countries simultaneously. Central to this change, of course, is the human element, the seafarers, who we must embrace along the way. And therefore, allow me now, because my panelists have already been introduced, and in order to save time, allow me to move into the session by asking some few key questions that will help us delve deeper into the topic at hand. And I want to start by straight away going to Mr. Helio Vincent. And I want to say this. One thing that has become very clear from Professor Olcher's presentation is that shipping will need to play a very key role in its own transition towards decarbonization. And what is often overlooked is how it can also be an enabler of the wider global energy transition. The International Renewable Energy Agency estimates that 50% of all new fuels to be used by various industries and sectors will need to be transported by ship. So to you, Mr. Helio Vincent, what practical steps are ship owners taking to ensure that the shipping itself plays its full part in the global fight to address climate change? Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nancy. And that question really does encapsulate the magnitude of the task that we're facing. We work very closely with IRENA, in fact, to address some of these decarbonization challenges that we face. And as you rightly pointed out, shipping will play a key role, not only in its own transition, but importantly, we have a duty as an industry to empower the wider energy transition of other industry sectors and economies as well. So currently, will come as no surprise, somewhere between 80 and 90% of global trade is transported by ships. 36% of that is energy. Now, to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, we need to see about an 18-fold increase in the world's existing renewable production capacity. So the scale of transformation is absolutely huge. if we're going to make it. And as you pointed out as well, 50% of new green fuels are going to be transported by ships. This means that other industries, so it's not just us, other industries and governments are going to need shipping to be able to decarbonize themselves. So that's exactly why we must not work in silos as an industry. We've got work that we're doing at the IMO, and that is very good work, and we need to continue there. But we must not focus only on us or in a single country. Instead, we need to start to think much more cross-sectoral and international with our actions and with our levels of investments as well. So being aware of this, ICS created what some of you may already know, is the Clean Energy Marine Hubs initiative. So this is very much an effort about trying to break down barriers between different industries and governments to collaborate and come up with some practical solutions to the challenges that we're facing. We view this initiative at ICS very much as a game changer, not just for the maritime sector, but for all the different parts of the value chain that we've been able to bring together to have these discussions. And Irina, as you pointed out, is very much involved in that. But I think it suffices to say that without shipping, the transportation of fuels at scale simply just would not be possible. But there are opportunities for all in the green transition. It really cannot be a zero-sum game. Everybody can benefit from it. And if I can leave one last thought, it would probably be, in terms of us as an industry, we're looking very much, and it's already been said, at a multi-fuel future. So we'll see opportunities for ports to become vital energy hubs and production facilities as well.
Wow, thank you so much, Helio. Always a pleasure to listen to you, and thank you for giving us the bigger picture that we do not only need to decarbonize ourselves as an industry, but also to play a big role in helping other sectors as well. And also you bring out the opportunities that are also there for multiplier effects for the industry. Allow me now to move on to Mr. John Lloyds and to invite you to tell us one thing. What do we see as the danger or impact of delay to the decisions about the next generation of fuels, while ship owners hesitate to make a decision on how to move forward in a way that Helio has told us is very necessary? Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Professor Olsher, I thought it was a fascinating presentation that knocked on the door of a couple of things that perhaps we haven't considered enough of. And, you know, one of those that you've shone a small spotlight on was the implications of continued population growth and the impact on that for the demand on energy and so on. You know, it's part of the conundrum that we're solving. And I love the slide that you had with the ship on it and those little bits that can contribute to efficiencies. And we were hearing earlier on from Ojfel about how they're concentrating on that. But it seems to me that the real demand we have here is to take some fairly bold and significant steps to address the emissions question, the challenge that we're faced with. And if we're to do those, there's a great danger of trying to do things in a hurry. And at the moment, I just wonder if we are setting ourselves an increasingly difficult challenge by the delays that are coming before us. And that really we need commitment from another really well-made point. People make decisions. People make decisions. And that's how we're going to change the next generation, by taking bold decisions. And I think I heard somebody say to me once, and it resonated quite strongly, politicians know the right answers. Right now, they know the right answers. What they don't know is how to implement those right answers and get re-elected. So somehow we need to take that threat away by having some long-term planning and working together. And that's about collaboration. That's about people sharing that risk and investment and commitment. It is about making sure that people are not disadvantaged by taking bold decisions now, because the later we leave this, the greater the challenge, the greater technical challenge, and the greater environmental impact we're going to have to overcome. So I think it's really important that we move forward soon. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for that stark reminder that we have to be very bold and make very significant steps. And it reminds me that we only just came to reach a level of safety in fossil fuel after a long time. And the new change we need, we may not have as much time as this, but human element will help us to get there. And therefore we must put all we have in it. Which leads me now to my next question. And I want to pose this to Mr. John Lloyd. Based on all the issues we've had and the matters, emerging and the challenges, do you think we are doing enough to train seafarers and equip them with the essential skills they need for the next generation of fuels? Thank you.
Oh, I think that's a really short answer. No, there is just no question we're not doing enough. And I think Professor Olcher's responses there begin to shine a spotlight on why we need clarity about that training. I actually think we heard earlier today that we have people with experience in the sector, and there's a big portfolio of skills which will be required, whatever the next generation of fuels looks like. So we can actually start progressing this training now. We have got incredible sophistication in terms of flexible learning opportunities that were accelerated through COVID, where people learning in supervised online or computer-based training or face-to-face. There's a lot more flexibility there. But the reality is that we, in my opinion, is that we're sitting on our hands waiting for a very clearly defined output, waiting for a very clear sense of what it's going to look like. So in a nice orderly fashion, we can progress to making sure our people are a little bit better trained. We don't have enough urgency. We don't have enough energy going into the training that's required. And I think this is where leadership is required. Leadership from industry, leading industry bodies, collaborations working together, accepting this as a shared responsibility. And it's flag states, it's industry leaders. We know that to get something approved and implemented through the IMO is going to take us, we'll do 3 years to agree it, and then we'll have a 5-year implementation period. It's not agile enough. Industry, codes of practice, drawing upon the best expertise that we've got in the industry, and implementation before the end of 2023. That's the answer. Let's crack on and do it.
Wow, thank you so much. Mr. Helio, can I come back to you, please? Mr. Vincente Helio. I just want to...
A lot to unpack, Nancy. A lot to unpack. Interesting comments.
Very, very interesting conversation. Now, I just want you to tell us that in the context of many countries who are announcing plans to produce and export zero-emission fuels, such as hydrogen fuels, which we expect to be imported around the world to help power the various national economies so that countries can deliver on the climate targets. Now, in your opinion, how important is the role of Africa as these key strategic decisions are being made? Are we observers as Africa, or where are we? Thank you, sir.
Very good question, Nancy, and thank you for that. And before I dive into it, if I could just respond to a few of the comments. I think Professor, also with some of the elements that you've described, I think we might inadvertently potentially be part of the same project with IMO going forward. So I very much look forward to meeting with the IMO on Monday, where we will be further discussing some of the elements that you mentioned in your presentation and in your previous comments, because we are really trying to be very practical. In terms of the comments about how much is being done on training and there needing to be leadership from the industry, I think the one thing I would say, John, we absolutely hear you. And this is exactly why the Maritime Just Transition Task Force was formed. And if you'd like to be part of it, I would love to have that discussion at some point, and we can certainly consider that in terms of how we can partner going forward. But going back to Nancy's question, I think the role of Africa really cannot be underestimated in this. I believe that the continent can play a leading role through ambitious decarbonization plans and investments in projects that will achieve tangible results. So if we go back to the IRENA estimate that Nancy mentioned earlier about shipping transporting up to 50% of new green fuels, not only for us as an industry, but for the wider global chain, the production and the storage facilities for these new fuels, if we keep in mind that 50% of those will be transported by ships, then surely the production and the storage should happen near ports, right? So we've brought the International Association of Ports and Harbors. We obviously need to make sure with certain fuels that if we're doing it around port areas, that it's as safe and as efficient as possible. But it's definitely a conversation that needs to be had, and African policymakers have a huge role to play. As my mother always used to tell me when I didn't do my homework, failing to plan is planning to fail. So I really call up on policymakers around the world to really take this on board, because if we get our next steps wrong, the impact on the supply chain in general, not only for shipping, I must reiterate, would be devastating. So we're currently seeing some countries and companies looking after their own needs, and although they're doing great work, we really must ensure that zero emission fuels are available at scale for absolutely everyone. So then the planning and the de-risking of investments really needs to start immediately. To give you some idea, I've never been a ship owner in my life, and I never will be, but I know of a handful of them. And a very well-known one recently invested about 1 billion euros to buy 10 dual fuel engine ships. Each of those ships will be used to transport 9,000 electric vehicles at a time. And these will use mega lithium batteries and will be prepared for the use of ammonia as a marine fuel. And that's already been discussed earlier, the implications of that. But these investments take time to plan, and importantly, these ships will not be available to them until 2025, and that's because shipyards have limited capacity, and building the port and the people infrastructure needed is also not a quick task. So governments in Africa and companies, Africa and beyond, will need to start planning now and together, so that we can start to make this happen. But suffice it to say, with respect to ship owners being slow, I think we've set out fairly early on that we're fully committed to net zero CO2 emissions by 2050, and we're looking with a great interest and participating actively in the IMO negotiations to make sure that whatever eventually is agreed on that front meets us there, helps us to meet our target. So we've had a lot of initiatives in the IMO, as you all know. Nancy, you're a seasoned IMO veteran, and the most recent of which is the fund and reward proposal that we've put forward at the Marine Environment Protection Committee of the IMO. So this would essentially require ship owners to make mandatory contributions per ton of CO2 emitted to create a new fund. And then this fund would essentially be used to reward ship owners for the uptake of low and zero carbon fuels, more specifically rewarding those first movers for the CO2 emissions that they're able to prevent by use of alternative fuels such as methanol, ammonia, hydrogen, and so on. So the fund, in addition to doing that, it could also be used to support support alternative fuel production and bunkering infrastructure in Africa and in other developing countries on an accelerated scale. So there's a lot that we're doing. I could go on and on about this one, but I think I'll leave it there. But the underlying message, to echo what John and Professor also have mentioned, is really collaboration. We need to continue that, to reinvigorate that going forward.
Wow, thank you so much. Such an interesting session and very, very informed panelists. It's been a pleasure listening to you and learning so much. And I want to believe that everybody has enjoyed this session, and that's the reason we've been allowed to overrun and we've not been interrupted. And I want to end it there. I think we've had a lot of knowledge imparted on us. And I like the parting shot that Mr. Vincente has given us, that we are in this together and we have to hold hands and do what we must do in terms of building the capacity to bring in the fuel, not just for us, for other industries as well, but most important, to build the capacity that we need very intentionally and also impactfully. So allow me, Mr. Moderator, to return this back to you. But before I do that, to really, really thank the organizers for organizing this session and also for having me and my panelists giving us the, the opportunity to be with you on this very, very important topic, and to thank my panelists for really breaking down such a complicated topic and making it so interesting and easy to absorb. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't envy John summing up all of this, so I'm going to hand it over to him like a hot potato. John, over to you.
Thank you very much for that. I think the first point that we need to make is that we have all been exposed to some wonderful presentations by people who have done a great deal of research and preparation of their own to present these papers to us. I think the first step would be to mention President André de Gauban and his major points being that mentoring and providing cadet sea service were probably priorities in his presidency year, term of office rather than year. The first speaker, Dr. Vakili, mentioned that the aim was to provide sustainable shipping. And during the panel discussion following his very technical paper, I must confess, but it was interesting to hear Nick Sloan mentioning the Poseidon principle and the need for monitoring carbon footprints and so on. In the same panel, Kevin mentioned that new fuels, generally speaking, are not very energy efficient. So that gives us considerable room for thought. Onstein Jensen mentioned the advantages of shipping and posed the theory that they also pose a problem. Advantages being that they're very efficient, but there's still the problem of major pollution sources. It was interesting to hear him mention also traditional sources of cost saving and fuel saving, being weather routing and technical improvements to vessels. Our second speaker, Helio Vicente, mentioned unlocking green maritime jobs in Africa, providing decent work and maximizing opportunities. The decarbonization of the industry requires, he said, additional new skills, and Africa generally looks to South Africa for assistance and guidance. The Maritime Just Transition Task Force and are working very definitely towards solving some of those problems, one of them being a lack of trainers to pass on the new skills required for decarbonization systems and programs. During the panel discussion there, President Andre mentioned that cadets need to get onto ships, and that companies and governments need to step up to improve their cadet training provisions. During our last presentation from Professor Olscher, the journey, and he stressed the journey towards low carbon and energy efficient maritime future. Some of the important points that came through from there was that he mentioned once again the IMO theme of being new technologies for greener shipping, and that this was the third year in a row that that particular theme had come to the fore. So it actually stresses perhaps the importance of what we have been talking about and what we have been exposed to today. The most important aspect that came out of the initial paper was, I believe, to invest in future maritime leaders, the need to invest in future maritime leaders. The panelists in supporting the paper, Nancy Karigitu mentioned that central to the change is the seafarer, and that was supported later in the same panel discussion when John Lloyd said that progress, training, and which has been accelerated by the pandemic, needs to be conducted right away. And we should not wait to make changes to the sort of training that we need. He also mentioned that leadership needs to be more agile. Final point coming from the last paper and the panel discussion there was that Africa has an important role to play in the changes required for a system or a program towards decarbonization. This effectively brings us to the close of the formal part of this conference. But it is my pleasant duty to express my thanks to a number of people, to David, for your role as chairman this afternoon, and then to thank our branch committee and particularly our secretary, Yvette de Klerk, for their part in arranging this conference. Brendan, Alan, David, all played an active role in the production of this conference, very ably assisted by Anna from the headquarters in London. I think we need a vote of thanks also to big screen visuals, the team under Anwar for making it possible to host this conference online. Well done to you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to declare this conference now closed and to invite you all for a good old-fashioned bit of fellowship. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one last point of order. Ellen has a word.
Hi there, everyone. Just a quick one. On your way out, we've got some conference bags that we've put together. They're filled with all sorts of interesting bits and pieces. So don't forget to pick one up on your way out. Thanks very much.
Excellent job.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And I'm so
Thank you,
sorry
Eva.
I missed the last panel discussion. I had to run to the MCA, but I ran back and here I am. Thank you so much. I really, really, really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you, Yvette. Thank you for the invite.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yvette, nice to see you.
Yes, Nancy, I'm going to go as soon as the video is available. I'm going to watch the video.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.